Good morning to everyone who just joined us since our last meeting. Welcome to the Citrus County Board of County Commissioners preliminary budget hearing, July 26th at 9 a.m. And we've already done the invocation and pledge of allegiance, so we'll go to roll call, please.
This is a special meeting for the Citrus County Board of County Commissioners. It's 26th day of July, 2023. In attendance, our first Vice Chair, Holly Davis, second Vice Chair, Rebecca Bays, Commissioners Jeff Kennard and Diana Finnegan, County Administrator Steve Howard, and Management and Budget Director Aaron Doran.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
So we have a preliminary budget hearing and we have a presentation that we're going to be giving. Can you hear me? I wanted to say first, thank you to the management and budget staff, all of the departments, all the constitutionals. They start providing us information in February and March to put this budget together. So sometimes it is a little frustrating because they're budgeting like 6 months in advance and things change all the time. So there is a stopping point. We have to tell them where we have to balance the budget, and then we will continue to make changes as time goes on. And those will be the 2 September hearings if there are any changes. I wanted to quickly go over some of the things that will be in this presentation and some of the items that will not be in the presentation. When you are looking at these budgets, please know that our departments especially have projects that are ongoing. They already have purchase orders open. So those are not reflected in these budgets. Those purchase orders will be rolled into the new year, and an entire list of those purchase orders come to the board for your approval to roll. So you will see all of those projects that will continue into next year. Cash carry forward, that is when our departments have a project planned, but for whatever reason, they can't get that purchase order open before the end of the year. So they have already kind of told us, here's some projects that we still need to do, but we won't have a purchase order to roll yet. So we're going to need to carry forward that cash to do that project. That information actually starts on page 682, and I will reference some of those as we go through this presentation, but that again will get added to their budget. Also grants, because they have all different periods of performance, they come all throughout the year. We adopt them as we get them, and we will re-adopt them for next year. Again, some of them you will see in here like CARES and ARPA because they were so large that they were in there, but for the most part, they come to you separately to be adopted. I can tell you, and the clerk puts in the annual comprehensive financial report, the schedule of expenditures for federal awards and state financial assistance. Last year, the county expended over $17 million in grant funding. So it can be quite a bit. So the first slide goes over the ad valorem taxes and the millage rate. You can see for this year that totaled 8.2458 mils. The guidance from the board was to keep the millage the same and then add half a mil for the pay in class implementation and 0.2 of a mil for road resurfacing. That would bring that millage to 8.9458. Then there is a summary of total budget. As you look down that just kind of has a high level overview for the different areas. You can see at the bottom, CARES and ARPA, that balance went down significantly. That is because some of those projects now have purchase orders that will be rolled into next year. And some projects have already been selected. So that has already been designated for a project and it'll be cash carry forward into the next year. So that's why when you look at the total budget, it is a reduction overall, mostly because of that line. The next is a taxable value history. As you know, this year, taxable value went up 11.89%. The next slide is total budget and operating reserves. So this is for the entire county and all of our budgets. The next slide actually talks about general fund operating and reserves. And that's where we start looking at the increase. It went from 16.6 million this fiscal year to 27 million in fiscal year 24. I will tell you that $7 million of that $27 million is for priorities you all had put aside. $5 million is for the sheriff, potentially for that those additional positions, and about $2 million is the additional for pay and class. When all was said and done, there was some funding left. That leaves about $20 million in reserves, and based on our budget, that comes in right about 17%. So the high end of our reserve policy. The next slide is everyone's favorite dollar. This was this year's average residential property tax. You can kind of see it's broken down: the county, the school board, the cities, and then some of the other taxable districts. So Swift Mud, mosquito control. The total county budget, obviously the largest is the general fund at 35.51%. And then the general fund expenditure types, the largest portion of that will be the constitutional officers at 35.68%. The next slide further breaks down the constitutional officers, the largest being the sheriff, currently at $35,447,494. The next slide talks about personnel changes. So under ad valorem supported, there is an additional executive assistant to the board, and we were removing a systems management system administrator 2. That was a temporary position for someone that was retiring. So that person came on, was trained, and now that extra position is being eliminated. Under the enterprise and special revenue funds, Beverly Hills MSBU has decided they want a ground maintenance tech 2 part-time. There are several positions for building. And just so you're aware, Eric Landon will be bringing forward a item to a regular board meeting to explain the additional positions, what they'll be doing, and how they'll be functioning. This is one of those things that already changed last week. So it's already increased. We need some more staff, and some of those position titles are changing. You will see down there, there's 2 EMS positions, an EMT and a paramedic, that are being deleted. These are 2 positions that Chief Stevens is going to discuss with you later on when they were attempting to balance their budget, and one of the options that might be there to do that. And then there was a utility reg executive assistant that was added out of budget cycle, but is a new position. The next few slides are regarding the constitutional officers. The clerk's office provided us their updated figures. So the percent increase now is 8%, excluding those one-time purchases. The supervisor of elections, you can see their budget now, and then there are the reserves that we talked about. So the increase is 22.6%, but again, that's due to it being a presidential election year. The next slide is judicial services. These are both from ad valorem taxes and special revenue funding. The next slide is a property appraiser. You will see that, again, they are funded by general fund and other BOCC taxing authorities. So the board's increase was 2.52%. The overall increase for the budget was 5.3%. The next slide is the sheriff's office. I'm going to go over the slide we have, and then I believe the sheriff is here with their presentation that they're going to provide you. We are going to ask for more guidance regarding this particular budget. At the bottom, we're just letting you know this does not include the school resource officers that's funded under public safety. There were 44 sworn positions applied through for the COPS grant. Going forward, after that grant may not happen, the general fund would still have to support 100% of those positions after some point in time. We did contact the granting agency to see when possibly we would hear about that award. They said they're aiming for the end of September. It might be the 1st of October. Right now, like I said, that funding is sitting in reserves. So even if we didn't hear, it could be passed and left in reserves and budget transferred over to them. And then the additional guidance is related to the starting salary. Back in June, we brought you their updated figures, which increased the starting salary to $60,507. The guidance we received was to go with the $55,050 with the 3% increase. So I don't know if the sheriff or whoever's here from their office want to provide their presentation.
Good morning, Sheriff.
Morning. How's everyone this morning?
Fantastic.
Well, thank you for the budget amendment yesterday for the 22-23 budget to allow us to have the funding to go out and try and harvest some applicants to fill our sworn ranks and get after the well below what the standard should be of service for the citizens in our community, and add some folks that are out there to answer the always increasing demands for calls for service, which just last year increased by 11% right here in Citrus County. So that will go a long ways towards answering some of that, but there's still many gaps out there as we've discussed. And I want to thank you, Chair Davis, Commissioner Finnegan, and Commissioner Bays for making some time in your schedules when we reached out to you to make sure that we all understood where the misinformation was during a presentation that occurred on the 20th of June. And it's unfortunate we couldn't get with you, Commissioner Kennard, but I know you being a doctor and you having a practice to run, your calendar's pretty busy. But for the sake of making sure that you're on the same page with the other three commissioners, I would like to review a couple of things with you since you couldn't make it to the meetings with us over the last couple of weeks. First and foremost, on the 20th of June, when that meeting happened, we had no knowledge of it. I don't know if you were briefed by Mr. Howard or staff, but we were not invited. My staff was never informed of the meeting, and we would have gladly been here to make sure that we corrected some errors in some of the statements that were provided during that meeting, because it's very important that we all arrive on the same page and we all understand exactly what we're talking about. Our budget is unique. When you talk about the constitutional officers, we're vastly different from every other constitutional officer that's here within our community, and every sheriff's office is vastly different than any other constitutional office across the community. Our folks work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, as you well know. You've been out on ride-alongs with some of our deputies in the past. And not only that, but they work holidays. They work weekends. And then when we have a natural disaster bearing down on Citrus County, it's all hands on deck. Everybody shows up. Every employee of the Citrus County Sheriff's Office is an essential employee. And it was a little shocking to listen to that presentation and hear some of the comments that were made. So I do want to kind of clarify the record. While if you look superficially at this one slide that you all were provided, it does come up to 39% of an increase. But that's on the heels of the 22 positions that we were told to come back to the board with once we filled all of our vacancies among the sworn, which we did on March 1st of this year when we said, we're full, please provide us the funding to go out and buy the capital and also recruit from the soon-to-be graduating classes at the various academies in the area so that we could get those folks into our team. And when we briefed you during the budget cycle for the 22-23 lead up to the budget that took effect on 1 October, we talked about where we needed to be just in patrol. And we also informed all of the board members that were part of the Board of County Commissioners at the time that we were just addressing patrol, but next year we were also going to take a harder look at our detectives and all of those other various things that we're trying to get after to make sure we serve the needs of our citizens and we keep pace with the rapid growth that we're seeing across our community. So last year, when we put the budget together, we said we needed 22 to be added to the 220 sworn positions that we already had. And then this year, we were going to come forward with a request for an additional 15 on top of the 22 that we asked for last year. And we discussed during several of the meetings leading up to the final approved budget last year that we would love to be able to put in for a COPS grant, which comes through the Department of Justice, that helps us pay a significant portion of the salaries of those employees that we could hire that could get after the needs of our citizens and respond to the rapidly increasing call volume that we see, plus the other proactive things that we don't have time to get to because our deputies run from call to call to call, responding to the needs of our citizens. So we put the budget amendment in for the 22, not hearing anything about that budget amendment until just yesterday. That's why there was an 11.54% increase to the budget from last year, because we had to make sure that we accounted for that somewhere until we got some type of notion on what the board was going to do. And that's why we included that number in there. So when you take that away from the 39%, that diminishes that number by 11.54%. Additionally, on May 11th, when I was at my grandson's graduation from high school, Colonel Vitt and Director Seffrin came in and briefed the board on where we were with the COPS grant and why we thought this was a good thing for our community to really bring us up to where we needed to be for the patrol assets and take care of the things that are here present now, and how it was a good investment because that's money we've already sent to Washington, D.C. And if we don't harvest that money for the good of our community, some other community will, and they'll leverage our tax dollars that we sent to Washington for the benefit of their community. So it was great to get that. And that number actually amounts to 18.17%. So here we are at this meeting that occurred on June 20th when we weren't invited, and about 30% of that budget increase of 39.72% was already accounted for by the Board of County Commissioners, giving us guidance and approving unanimously the COPS grant that we applied for on May 11th of this year, which left us with a much smaller number for a budget increase. And what I'd like to do is go specifically into a couple of areas of that budget increase where we can actually hit the next slide where we talk about the 22 and hit the next slide and we talk about the 44. And then we go in and actually address the budget increases. In years past, we've gotten pretty good conversations going well before we get to the June 1 submission of the budget, and we understand where our Florida retirement system rates are going, where workers' comp's going, and where our health insurance rates are going. Well, this year's budget only said 3%, just a 3% increase. A 3% increase in guidance doesn't even cover the cost of workers' comp, health insurance, and FRS increases. The workers' comp, FRS, and health insurance increases total 3.03%. In addition, last year, committed to by the previous chairman back in June of 2022, when Mr. Oliver was our county administrator, there was a Motorola contract that falls up underneath our budget, although it supports all of the countywide operations, that came to $319,258 for 0.91%. So when you add those already on top of budget increases to our budget, we're at almost 4%. And so you add that to the 34% or the 30% that we're out, that we've already discussed from the 44 positions and the 22 positions, we're only a few fractions of a percentage away from what
Chair.
you gave as guidance.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner
I have a
Kennard.
question. Sheriff, it seems like when we bought the newest software for the Emergency Operations Center, that we divided up the cost of that between your office, fire, and EMS. I mean, just if my memory serves me correct, I think we divided that up equally between those three operations that use this new software. Now, you said that the Motorola 911 system is used by the entire county, but the entire budget for that falls under your budget? Is fire and EMS not sharing in any of that?
For this particular expense category, no. This all falls underneath the sheriff's budget.
Okay, well, I'll be interested in hearing from the chief about why, if fire and EMS are both using the same system, why it's all falling under the sheriff.
Well,
So
there
we'll
are
talk
several
about
other things, Commissioner Kennard, when it comes to radios and the towers and everything, where that falls underneath the sheriff's office budget. And in the past, we've brought that up to the staff as well as the county administrator, and we talked about that, and we go, okay, yeah, that makes sense that we've got to pull that out and extract that, because it's not right that it's a countywide asset, but it shows up underneath our budget.
Okay, all right, thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
No, thank you. So as we look at these other increases that are there, there's no acknowledgement of the funds we return at the end of the year. And in our budget submission this year alone, and let me see if I can find the page for you. It's the page right after the organization chart. And it says anticipated additional revenues to the sheriff's office of $378,053. And every year we return funds back to the county from the crossing guard contract, the state and local fuel tax to the county, monies that we return to the county if we've got a contract for a capital item and it doesn't come in time, civil fees, records fees. And so that accounts for a pretty substantial amount of money. It's almost another %. So the net effect on our budget, when you add all those factors in, is a 5.1% net increase over what we budgeted last year. That's our net effect. And that's if the COPS grant came in and if we would have received the full 22 positions that we requested through last year's budget to support the needs of our citizens. So those numbers would have been brought up and discussed back in June if we would have had the opportunity to be notified and be here at that meeting. So the other thing that's really timely is that every sheriff across the state of Florida is competing for the same pool of folks that are graduating from these academies. So is every chief of police. So are all of the state agencies. And just yesterday, we heard from the director of the Highway Patrol. And for the first time in over 3 decades, with a class that's about to graduate from their academy up there, there are going to be less than 200 positions vacant, the first time in over 3 decades. So it's a tough slog to get folks to come out there. It's critically important that we back the blue with not only our words, but the tangible things like pay and incentive increases. And when we're looking at the cost of inflation that we've discussed about and that I elaborated on quite extensively in my letter to you, I think a modest 5.1% overall increase over what we had last year to meet the needs of these employees that we're trying to keep as well as trying to recruit into the agency is not a heavy lift.
Sheriff,
Yes, ma'am.
I felt we had a very productive discussion. However, I would like to say that I have heard from staff, and of course, since everything's under sunshine and email records are archived very carefully, that you did receive an email invitation along with the rest of the constitutionals. So I'd like to not keep saying that you weren't invited. We all miss things, and but we're here now, and I think you have a lot of support from this board. So if we can just move on that topic, that would be great.
Well, I learned a long time ago, Commissioner Davis, that a message passed is not always a message received.
Yes.
And you know that as well as being a pilot yourself, that you want to confirm. that
Two-way
you-
comms, yes.
Absolutely.
Of course. And I also was very happy to hear that you and Mr. Howard have gotten a good communications thing going now since that little issue. So, but let's all move forward happily. That would be good.
Great.
We're all on the same team.
And I'll echo that. I think I've talked with the sheriff, and actually we talk a lot. Actually, the colonels and stuff. I want to congratulate the sheriff for his great staff he's got. Had an issue even on Friday night I dealt with for after hours. So thank you for the strong support there. But I'm dedicated to that. If I've talked to the sheriff about that, we're going to strengthen communications. I've actually talked to my staff. I think there's some things we can improve on communications on our end to make sure we get it right. So I'm 100% committed to that.
This is a completely different BOCC than it was a year ago, and we're still getting some of the kinks worked out, but better days. We already have better days, and I see even better days ahead. So
Absolutely. Absolutely.
thank you. Anyway,
you.
carry on.
Well, this concludes that part of the presentation. Are there any questions for you that I can answer?
So if you could go into talking a little bit about the COPS grant, because where I'm coming down on this is that we just approved the 10. I'd like to get another 12 in the budget, and as our discussion went, you expect very little, if any, of the positions to be approved through the COPS grant, especially during a Democratic administration. So to my mind, 12 is a really good number to go for, but I would like to know if you could walk us through what the financing is if we do get any of the COPS grants, because I believe there was a 3-year deployment of whatever we get. So say we get 12,
Correct.
all right, or whichever.
I'll try not
How
to.
quickly does that have to be deployed?
I'll try not to step on my poncho, and I'll ask Tracy
Okay, that was
Suffern
funny.
to keep me out of trouble here. But let me give you some high-level stuff first. In fiscal year 2022, 25% of the 711 applicants were approved for COPS grant money. 25%. Fiscal year 21, 31% of 590 applicants were approved. Fiscal year 20, banner year, but we all know what happened in 20. It was an election year. 55% of 1,091 applications were approved. However, fiscal year 19, fiscal year 18 saw 0 grants approved through the COPS administration, through the DOJ. And I'll just go back one more year. Fiscal year 17, 16% of 1,100 were approved. As we've seen in the past, some of these grants, the money doesn't come in until well after the beginning of the new federal fiscal year, which coincides with our own fiscal year for the county. In other cases, it could be late spring before we see some action taken on these. So while we don't know what we don't know about the COPS grant application, it could be that we applied for 44 and they give us 10. And we won't know that until we see what they do and how much money they actually put through their allocation process through the appropriations committees in the House and Senate in DC. If it's approved for every position that we get funding for, we would get $125,000 over a 3-year period of the grant. First year, we might not get a dime until we actually hire the people to fill those positions. You have to have the folks in the positions to be able to draw the money down from Washington, D.C. And once you do start that process, you must keep those folks on your payroll or keep those positions filled for the entirety of the grant period, which is 5 years or 60 months. So it's a $125,000 reimbursement to the applying agency per FTE over the course of the life of the grant cycle.
I'm just trying to get a handle on how much needs to go in what year of our budget is.
Well,
essentially
and that's, that, the devil is in the details, and, you know, as we talked about, not only is the governor of our state running against the incumbent in Washington DC, but we're also another pretty well-known resident of the state of Florida is running for president. And I don't see the likelihood of a grant like that to the substantial tune of funding being sent down to Florida for an agency our size. It might go to a Tampa, it might go to an Orlando or an Orange County sheriff or a Jacksonville sheriff's office or Miami-Dade, especially Miami-Dade, considering the fact that they're going to start the entire apparatus of an elected constitutional sheriff's office down there beginning next year. And that office is starting from zero next year. And so I could see that some of the folks down there are leaning forward on that. And we don't know
That
how
would
many
make sense.
agencies from Florida have applied for any of that grant money to be able to go out and see what they can harvest. But it would be a smart move on the leaders down in Miami-Dade County to put in a grant for that in order to be able to get the infrastructure and the overhead to support what they need to do to create a sheriff's office and fill out all of the robust things that need to be put into place to address those needs.
Commissioner Kennard, Commissioner Bays, any questions?
Not this time.
Okay. Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you.
So we do have a slide at the end for discussion and additional direction. That particular budget is part of that slide. Do you wish to wait till the end to have that discussion, or would you like to discuss that
Well, we just
now?
finished slide 17. Are we on 18? Yep, agency budgets.
Yes, but do you all want to leave the sheriff's budget the way it is with the 6.375 for the 44 sworn positions that were applied for through COPS?
How much is it for 12 instead? 12 full, no cops.
For no COPS, when we looked at the newest numbers, I believe it came to somewhere around $2.4 million.
So it'd be a pretty substantial savings to drop to 12.
Right.
And then it would be even better savings if any of those are covered by cops.
You would have to speak with the sheriff. I don't know if once they hire them, it can't go under COPS. I'm not very familiar with that grant, but I believe
Right.
that's how that works. So, but we can move on to slide 18, which is agency.
Does anybody want to talk about that? And
Yeah, I'm not sure where you're going with the additional 12. This is in addition to,
no, instead of the 44.
instead of the 44. Well, they've already applied for 44.
I'm aware.
So I think that we just have to wait and see what they're approved for. You know, maybe it's 44, maybe it's 22, maybe it's 5.
Okay.
But we've got to set aside so much in reserve to be prepared for that.
Right.
You know, I think the only other thing on here, at least that I'm seeing that you were asking for guidance on, was the salary increase for the new hires. The increase for after the first year going from rather than 10% increase to a 3% increase, which was the board guidance, and I think that's where we need to stay, is at 3%.
Now you have to say it all over again because the mic wasn't on.
Is that correct? The guidance you're looking for is the board going to support the first year raise at 10% as requested in the sheriff's budget, as opposed to the 3% that this board gave you direction on, or gave direction on last time? Like the
Right.
3% increase from the starting salary of $55,000 was the guidance, and I think that's where we need to be. I mean, I appreciate what the sheriff's telling us, but the pie's only so big. And we'll get to it at some point, but this millage rate, the new millage rate of 8.9, I forget what the rest of it is too high. That may be where we land today, but that's not what I'm going to support when it comes to September. So we've still got some trimming to do in our next two meetings.
Commissioner Kennard, I'm glad to hear you say that, because if we run, everybody says you want county to, or government to run as much like a business as you can. We still have a lot of research going through all this. This is our first, for the public, this is how big the budget is. And there's a lot of trimming to be done and go through it, but we can only go down, we can't go up.
Yep, I agree.
So set it high and bring it down by September.
So the guidance, I would suggest the guidance from the board on that first year raise is 3% rather than 10% for those new hires.
Commissioner Bays, do you concur?
Yes, and considering that we just funded 10 positions yesterday, it would be my personal direction that we would look at 12 positions and hold the monies aside for that. And once those 10 positions are filled, then we reassess the need for additional deputies. We've been at this a long time. Jeff, since 2010, and I can tell you from a county standpoint, I feel like the Board of County Commissioners has always set aside for the benefit of other constitutional officers. We have some tremendous growth going on in this county. We have not funded our deficits, such as roads. And I think that we have an obligation to the taxpayers. We are the ones that collect this money, and I think that we have got to start to take care of some of the deficiencies that we have let go over many years. And number one for me is roads. People have moved here, they bought a home, they made an investment. We made the investment to initially build those roads so that they would move here. Now it's our job to take care of those roads. So I hear everybody loud and clear. But when I go on and I research, I think the sheriff said it best the other day in the paper, money doesn't grow on trees. So money doesn't grow on trees. And I think that we have to be conservative, but also realize where we're at, what our obligations are to the citizens. It's the old analogy, government cannot give you what it does not previously take from you. And that's where we're at.
Exceptionally well said, Commissioner Bays. Commissioner Finnegan?
I'm good with that. It sounds like we're going to get the sheriff some more deputies. If the cop grant doesn't work out, it seems like we could still give him some additional team members to keep us all protected and safe. So I'll go with that.
Excellent. Aaron?
So then the consensus would be we will keep that 5 million in the reserve until we find out, or do we just want to budget for the 12 and keep the 12 officers in the reserve?
I think that we need to, he asked us if he could apply for 44 and we said yes. So we need to keep enough money. If everything works out rainbows and roses, we need to be prepared for those 44 because that's what we decided as a board.
Commissioner Bays?
I agree with what you said. However, it was never my understanding that when 44 were asked for under a grant, that it would be 44 and 22. So we just funded 10. And at best, out of that 44 would only be 34 at this point in my mind. So I'm not willing to fund a total of 44, even if you got all 44. And it sounds pretty dismal that we're going to get anything out of that grant from what he just said. So that would be my position.
Commissioner Kennard?
Yeah, I think that I think some middle ground here, if you will, is I am not prepared to fund the full 44 on top of 22 new positions. We've already approved 10. He's applied for, or the sheriff's office, I should say, has applied for 44 new positions. I think that we need to have the funds in reserve should we be approved for those 44 new positions. If the number that's approved is less than that, that money is sitting in reserves, and then at that point, I think we have a discussion about rolling that money out of reserves and into infrastructure projects, needed infrastructure projects. I would suggest, it's a discussion for another day, but I would suggest one-time projects, not road resurfacing, because we've still got to find a way to get to a number that's a recurring number every year. But when we find ourselves with significant reserves, like if we move forward with what's before us today, there's going to be significant reserves. If the sheriff's office or the application, that COPS grant, ends up somewhere less than that 44, then I think we roll that money over into find one-time infrastructure projects that need to get funded and go after it, use it for that.
I would agree with that. That's kind of where I was thinking, is that if we do leave that in, and so it's the 6 million or whatnot, then we drop down to 12. If we get 0, we drop down to 12 that we fund ourselves. And then that remaining 4 million gets rolled into infrastructure because, as we were discussing yesterday, the barge canal boat ramp, for example, we have a lot of big infrastructure projects that really need to be expedited. So the money will certainly be deployed appropriately for our taxpayers. Yes, sir.
Madam Chair, so you're suggesting that regardless of what the award is on the COPS grant, that we've applied for 44. If there's 0 awarded, then you would suggest a minimum of 12 additional
That,
positions.
to bring us to the 22 that he.
So that would bring
yeah,
us to a total of 22. Okay.
the 10 we did yesterday, and then another 12.
Okay. All right.
So-
I would support that.
Okay. Anything further? Okay.
So we're going to continue to hold all of it until we hear back, and then we'll have another discussion. Okay. And then, as Commissioner Kennard stated, we're going to go with that 3% increase on that base salary. And then overall, previously, you all had decided to do 3% across for his budget as an overall increase. So that is in there as well.
Yes.
So is that still the consensus?
Yes.
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 Okay.
I just have a question about that. When you're saying 3%, Sheriff, I might not have the slide you had up. He had said to keep everything status quo and just cover the things he has to cover. And I think there was no raises involved. Wasn't that 3-point-something percent?
It's 3.03%.
And it was
Commissioner.
5.1?
No,
No, 5.1 was the total
no,
that you needed.
no.
Okay.
It's 3.03% to cover FRS increases, health care increases, and workers' comp increases. That's before we get to a pay raise, to meet the market conditions of the competing sheriff's offices and municipal law enforcement agencies that are right here in our area, that are all increasing their budgets this coming fiscal year by double-digit percentages to meet the market demands. Just yesterday, UPS agreed to a contract to raise every employee that's an hourly employee by $2.75 an hour. And there's a stack of agencies that we randomly selected that talked about hiring bonuses ranging from $10,000 to $15,000 to $20,000 and $25,000 that's competing with us to try and get law enforcement officers to stay here in Florida. Marion County, right up the road, is already above us for a starting salary. And I want to correct something that staff said that we talked about last week. What we budget for salary covers overtime. It covers holiday pay when our deputies and our communications officers are working in the field to support our citizens while everybody else is off enjoying the Christmas and New Year's holiday and Thanksgiving. The men and women from the sheriff's office are out there on duty. So we did not say we're starting our deputy's salary at $60,000. But in order to pay a deputy a pay raise above the $50,000 starting pay now, that's competitive with the market that's out there right now, in addition to the pay raises that my fellow sheriffs are planning on giving their employees on 1 October, we have to budget for $60,000 in order to pay them the competitive wage of about $55,000 as a starting salary. And Commissioner Kennard, a sergeant does not make $55,000 in the Citrus County Sheriff's Office. Better than that, but still much lower than Sumter, much lower than Hernando, and much lower than Marion County. And we're fortunate to keep them here with the keen competition for those talented individuals who are leading our agencies and out there directing deputies to make the critical calls to serve our citizens. So we budget 60 in order to give them a good pay raise this year to keep them and not even lose them to the state of Florida, which got a pretty substantial pay raise already on 1 July. And some sheriff's offices have already gotten approval to use money during their current fiscal year from the BOCC by getting additional funds to keep the folks that are there now, because the state gave pretty substantial pay raises.
Sheriff, if I may just, I don't know if anyone else is wondering. So when you hire someone, it's 55,000, you budgeted 60 for the overtime, the extra 5,000?
No, right now, this year budget, we're $24.05 an hour based on 2,080 hours. That's not counting 1 day of overtime for a call out where we could sometimes have 30 or 40 folks out on a call.
You said
That's not one holiday hour.
2488?
Say again?
Did you say 2488?
No, 2405.
2405.
It's 50. $50,024.
It's, how many hours in a year?
2080 is the
2080.
normal work time.
That's right.
No overtime.
Yeah,
No
that's
holiday.
$50,024. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's why it reflects 60 for starting pay for our deputies. But that's not factoring in everything else whenever you look at that.
So
To include the FRS increases of 27%
Well,
over
this is
last
just
year's
their
FRS.
pay, right?
Say again?
The 50 or the 60 is just their pay.
Yes, that's not the fully loaded salary. As we know, our fully loaded salary for a fresh deputy is 48%, Tracy? 45% more. So for every dollar in salary for a deputy sheriff, there's another 45% that you have to put into for FRS, workers' comp, health insurance, life insurance, and all the other mandatory
I
taxes.
understand all
that we
that. I
have.
was just trying to, so we know where the 60 is coming from. So are you saying they're getting paid 50 now, you want to pay them 55, and the extra 5,000 is overtime?
It's for overtime, holiday pay, and the benefits that we've got to make sure we calculate for that.
So you're
too.
asking to raise the starting salary from 50 to 55 in essence?
Well, with cost of living increase and also merit pay for our employees, it would bring them up to 55.
Okay. And where was the board on this?
Commissioner Kennard?
There's only so much money. I mean, we can give everybody raises and then turn around and take it right back out of their pockets in the form of property taxes.
Well,
we
you
can-
had said 3%, that's why I asked.
Yeah.
I didn't know if that was including which number that had in it.
Okay. I think we have given guidance. There's, as we've already talked about, there's more pencil sharpening that needs to go on between now and September. We just don't have the money. Last year we took a big step forward in getting the starting pay up for the sheriff's office. And at that time, we said that this year, the big bite was going to be getting county staff, our pay and class study, funding that. That's exactly what we're doing. Plus, we're trying to get the sheriff the 10 additional positions that we told him that we would take care of. And, we have taken a very big step forward, very big leap of faith, if you will, in applying for 44 new positions through this COPS grant. We'll find the money, we'll make sure that that happens for whatever he's approved. And we've gone as far as saying that if he's approved for nothing, we're going to fund 12 new positions. we're setting the money aside for that. So we're putting as much money aside for the sheriff's office at this point that we possibly can. There's no more money to give. There's no more room to give. The proposed millage rate increase right now is too high in my mind. As I said, Erin has brought forward exactly what we've given her guidance to do for today. And I think between now and our third budget meeting, that number needs to come down. How much? I don't know yet, but it needs to come down. It's too much.
Commissioner Bays? Thank you, Sheriff.
One last comment, Madam Chair. We're the 32nd largest county in the state of Florida. We fund public safety at number 59. We should do better than that for our people who run towards the sound of gunfire. And I think we all agree about that. And if we're going to serve our growing population, we have to keep the talent we're grooming, and we have to prepare them for increased responsibilities as our county growth continues to surpass the capabilities that we've got with the men and women we've got in uniform right now. Thank you.
The next slide is 18, and it is agency budgets. At the top, it's community agencies. That is actually the funding that goes to CASA, Key Training, and I think Youth Alternatives. Then there's county planning, Division of Forestry. Those are unchanged. The health department, just because of their millage, it's going to go up. And then the medical examiner, I put at the bottom, that is part of that increase. Most of that increase is for the morgue. They are having another meeting where they're going to discuss funding options. So without that morgue, or possibly some other configuration of how we'll pay for it, the increase would only have been 3.95%. And hopefully between now and
3.95?
3.95 if the morgue hadn't been funded partially this year.
I am incredibly impressed with how tight that doctor runs the office.
Yes.
She's good.
She is. The next slides start the board budgets. First is administration, and that's just kind of the breakdown of how it is funded, ad valorem, and special revenue funds. The first slide is the Board of County Commissioners, Communication Services, the county administrator, and the county attorney. There is some information in here. As you can see, the pay and class is partially reflected up in personnel services. And then we have assumed a 3% salary increase for county commissioners. Last year that came in higher, and we had to make an adjustment to the budget for that. So that's, until we hear, that's what we have in there. There is also a new position that we talked about earlier that is included in that. Without those things, the increase would have been 10%. Another factor in that is the $200,000 that you'll see under operating expenditures. The increase was $230,000, but $200,000 of that is a communications plan that was part of the strategic planning policy agenda for 2023. So we put that in there as, you know, that's what we were provided guidance for. And without that, the increase would have only been 1.3%. So that is that big lift for that.
Madam Chair?
Commissioner Kennard?
The $200,000 increase for the implementing this communications plan is an estimate of what that cost would be. I've had some conversations with Erin as well as Steve and Marcel that they think it very well could come in under that $200,000. What I had suggested was rather than plugging in the full 200,000, we think it'll be less than that. Why don't we decrease that number by half? Include 100,000 in there, and then anything over that, we could go to our contingency fund for. So if it comes in at 150 or 170, then we've budgeted for 100 of it, and we can pull 50 or 70, or maybe it's 30 from that contingency fund. I think our contingency fund right now, as we talked about, it's about $600,000 left in there right now to get us through to October 1st. And then, whatever the difference is to get us to 1.2, that remaining balance will just roll over for next year. But there's, the reason I say is there's still plenty there to handle $50,000 or $60,000 increase in implementing this plan. And who knows if all of that even, it's not a price tag on setting up the plan, it's implementing it. So who knows if those expenses will even come due by October 1st in trying to implement all this stuff. So just a thought that would be a way to reduce some of those expected costs in operating. My concern is that these things tend to roll over into next year's budget. And then, last year we increased 230. We're only increasing this year by 232. Well, that's how these budgets tend to grow out of control. So I would like to see us make some of these changes where we can.
Okay. Mr. Howard?
We had,
How much of that is basically one time and set up versus any sort of continuing?
we're
budget?
just, we're getting close to having a plan, I think before the end of September. And based on the strategies and tactics within that plan will be implementation. I had a great conversation with Commissioner Kennard, and I think that's a good approach. My only concern is just make sure I have commitment from the board. If I have to come back, I need to fund those things, because I think we're critically important with this county. We're talking about growth. We're talking about a lot of things, but we have to do a better job at telling our story and being proactive. As I'm going to crisscrossing this county and doing public speaking engagements, I'm hearing that constantly. So some of these could be, like a web redesign, could be apps for the citizen. There's a variety of those things, but I feel pretty confident that number could be lower. We don't know, but I'm doing the best I can, estimating, because we don't know the outcome. But I'd feel confident if I could at least get, half of that now that we have it plugged in, the commitment from this board when I come back, then I'm going to have your full support to implement that when I know what those costs are going to truly be. I don't know what it is going to be completely at this point. We know that there's going to be some costs associated with, but I think the ROI on doing this a better job at communicating to the public will be very beneficial to this community.
Substantial.
Yeah, it's a big deal. And there's a lot of things that this county's not done proactively, and it's somebody's fault. It's just that we're in a different, I always tell my story, 15 plus years ago, when I served in the same seat in another county, there was no social media. So that's another, avenue that you have to like it, love it, hate it. You've got to be able to go out there and tell our story, which I think is a very positive one. But that takes resources to do that. So I just need this commitment is a strategic priority, but I feel confident that we can reduce it now, as long as I have the commitment to come back forward with meaningful projects to do tactics and strategies. So I'd support that.
Commissioner Kennard?
Yeah, I would commit to supporting the additional funding with an additional, the 100,000 is the ceiling though. I don't want to get out there on a limb and come back with I need another 150, I need 200,000. I wouldn't expect that from you, but I would commit to supporting an additional request. If we can cut this number by 100,000 now, and then you come back and say, I need 30,000, 40,000, up to that 100.
Up to the total 200.
Yeah.
Right. I understand, and I don't have the 200 was the best.
Sure.
That's all we're doing, and I have no interest in, I want to get it lower. If
Yeah.
I can, I'm all about lower, if I can do it, but also have to have the quality. So that's important too as we're going forward. But yeah, I have no intention at this point of coming past that 200.
Yep, I agree.
Commissioner Kennard, as obviously with my background, I'm actually comfortable doing that. So I'm good with that. I've done proposals for everything that the county is considering doing, and I'm comfortable lowering it. I will say that One of the beautiful things is that once you start to see the savings in staff time and our time, not for leisure, by the way, but because it frees us up to do the big swing stuff that we have to do to get ahead of growth in this county. And the better job we do communicating with citizens, the more all of us are going to run much, much, much more efficiently. So you'll see that start to come online, and the ROI is going to be really substantial. And then you'll be even happier, I think, and maybe even the citizens will see, okay, yeah, they actually said what they're going to do. They let us know what's going on, because we do a lot of things right in this county, and I was kind of surprised when I first took office. I was like, wow, why doesn't everybody know about this, So, thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
Commissioner Bays, any comments? Good.
Something just under our budget. We've asked everyone to keep their budgets down within the 3%. Obviously, ours is over, and we need communication plans. And I know this year we have been deficient in our travel, and I'm actually okay with the percentage of raising it. I think there's so much built into this budget. I don't know that we should be taking that much money extra. We have on here travel, but then separately training, which it is important. We have things that we have to do by law, and there's travel that we have to do. And I wouldn't want anyone to not be elected or run for election for this position because maybe they couldn't afford the things that they have to do, like going out of county for meetings and getting the appropriate training. I'll just be honest, and I'm sorry, I have a real problem with commissioners taking in-county travel or setting that we have the option to do at the beginning of the year, which I do not do, estimating travel costs. Like, I feel like I'll use in-county this amount of miles. I've never, ever had a job where I got paid to drive to work. And I do have an issue with that. Now, not thinking of myself and thinking of people that would want to sit in this seat years from now, I think that we need to cover those things. I just think this is an exorbitant amount when we're asking everyone else to trim their budgets. I don't know that we should be raising ours that much higher.
If I may, we don't actually get mileage to go to work. The mileage is from the courthouse to assigned board meetings that are not this one. So, for example, when I go out of county to the morgue meeting, the medical examiner meeting, or to a meeting at LGB, you get that mileage. What it does not cover is all the things that I do to be a good commissioner, or any of us do to be a good commissioner, showing up at community events, showing up at community meetings, taking meeting, having a lunch meeting with citizens, et cetera. None of that is covered. None of our meals are covered. I'm just stating this for the record. In terms of our overall travel budget, I will say that it makes a huge difference when we, not only the training and the learnings, but when you go to these events like FAC, like NACO, like Florida Chamber, you hear not only best practices, that great things that other communities are doing that you can bring back to advance your own. So there's enormous education there. But we also hear about all these funding sources. And we previously had someone who represented us in Washington, D.C., who basically only came into the county when it was election time. And we now have a fantastic representative whose staff ran a analysis and showed that we have lost out on millions and millions and millions of dollars that we could have brought home from Washington, D.C., which are our tax dollars. And if we had been going to NACO for the last however many years, we would have known about that. And so I think that it is, I'm always, as a fiscal conservative, I'm always looking at, can I invest $10 here and get $100 back, right? You're a business person, you know that, right? It's the same thing with county. I do not want to be penny wise and pound foolish. We have to do best practices. We have to be aware of funding sources for both the state and the nation to bring home the best ideas back to Citrus County, because we've got a few challenges you may have noticed.
I agree with all of that. I just don't know if tripling the budget is the right thing to do.
If you go to, what the amount that is in there is essentially going to both NACOs, all Florida Association of Counties, and Florida Chamber Events.
And I don't
Will,
agree with.
will,
Okay,
may
go.
I finish? Will, if all 5 of us, there's no way that all 5 of us are going to go to all of those. There's no way we're going to hit that total number. So we certainly could reduce the total amount, but then it becomes a political play up here of, well, someone took money from my budget because they're traveling more. And I'm the one who's traveling the most. That's why I'm answering the question. So to my mind, I certainly talked to Mr. Howard about this amount, and that amount will end up being a true up at the end of the year. It's small money. It's
And I will still hold fast. I don't think that commissioners should rate mileage even from the courthouse to LGB. And I don't think anyone's sitting here waiting to go to the other building. I think we all come from within the county. I don't think the taxpayers would appreciate that, us driving around county, and I'll just stand by what I said. I do
Okay.
think that amount needs to go up, and I understand that because travel is expensive, but, and I do think being connected with other counties is very important, and there's other ways nationally to know about and get that grant money, absolutely.
Commissioner Kennard.
I would concur with Commissioner Flanagan's comments. It's we've talked about where we need to sharpen pencils as we go through this process, and the increase from, as I'm reading it, proposed increase from 3,200 to, is that 10,000?
That would be more than that, sir. That would be, if you add the training money in, what we used to have, it's going to be 11,500.
That is a great place to start to trimming this budget. So I think that we leave our travel budget where it was, at the 3,200, and look for other areas where we can cut back.
Commissioner
The
Kennard.
training is gone from $740 to $1,500. I would concur with my colleague on this one.
I am adamantly opposed to that line of thinking. How much continuing education do you do as a chiropractor?
It's probably 60 hours a year, I think. I'm not sure off the top of my head.
Mr. Howard brought up a great phrase when he first came here. He said, we need to turn Citrus County into a high-performance organization. And that means training, that means continuing education, that means best practices, that means being out there and having those conversations that spark great ideas. Every conference I've ever been to in my career, and personally, on the private side, as well as on the county side, has been drinking from a fire hose of amazing information.
Well, that may be.
Mm-hmm.
When I go to continuing education for my chiropractic business, I pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
If I want to go and do other continuing education stuff for this job, I can pay for it. I don't ask for other people to pay for my training, and I don't think that we should be looking at this kind of an increase and asking others to pay for it. We're spending other people's money. There's a big difference in public world versus the private world. And I don't mean that to sound condescending at all. I know you understand that. But these are major increases.
Are you not looking at staff training when you're referring to that? Are you saying that staff should pay for their own continuing education?
No, I'm looking at District 1, District 2, District 3, 4, and 5. Each of those travel going from $3,200 for each district to $10,000 per district, or the training going from $740 a year to $1,500 per year.
What is the makeup of the 1,500?
Although I ask Aaron, because I know Aaron got some So I don't have the numbers in front of me, but there was,
I think when Mr. Howard and I were discussing it, we had looked at some other registrations. So the training is the registration that you pay for to go to the event. So I know some of them have been coming in at $500-600. So I believe it was looking at the two
I
that
think the trending too,
Yeah.
probably.
So you're putting registrations under training?
yes.
Okay.
I would support keeping it where it was. Many organizations, both in the private world and the public world, many of those organizations exist to support themselves. It's my personal belief that some of these registration fees are astronomical and support those organizations' mere existence. So if they want to raise their registration fees, and this is something that individual commissioners want to attend, you've got $740 to credit to that each year. And if you want to attend more, then that comes out of the salary that the public pays us. That would be my position on it.
Commissioner Bays?
I'm perplexed. I will tell you, I mean, I think $10,000 travel is exorbitant, and I've never asked for any kind of mileage. I pay for a lot of my stuff on my own already, so.
So do I.
I think, considering where we're going, I can't support that level. I think registration, could be bumped to $1,000 just because registration fees are out there, and if you're going to go to anything at all, that could be 1 or 2 classes. But as far as the component of the travel, I think that's too lofty.
I'm fine with coming down from 10, but just even the difference in inflation and travel. And the 5 commissioners that sit up here are all fortunate financially. Some of us more fortunate than others. But you also have to set a standard that this is supposed to be a citizen representative job. And my dad said something when I first filed for office. He said, I wouldn't run for office unless I could pay for the whole campaign myself. And I looked at him and I said, oh, so only wealthy people can run for office? So you need to keep that in mind too.
It has nothing to do with the net worth of anyone. It's staying within a budget. And if we've got $3,200 to travel with, you got $3,200. We don't get more unless we reach out to the public and say we're taking more of your money so we can travel more.
Totally understand that.
So I can't justify it. I don't mean that again in an ugly way, but I completely concur with Commissioner Finnegan's position.
Can you not see your way clear to come up from 3,200 just to adjust at least for some inflation?
I don't think so. I think 3,200 is enough. That's plenty of money to travel and do the things that we need to do. It may not be enough to do the things that we want to do. And if we want to do more, the public pays us very well up here to do these jobs. And some of that, then if we want to improve our knowledge in certain areas or increase our knowledge in certain areas, then some of it may have to come out of our own pocket. Or we stay within that 3,200 and the public is paying that.
Well, a way to look at it too. Are you finished? I'm sorry, Commissioner.
Yeah.
Commissioner Finnegan.
When Commissioner Bays and I were elected, embarrassingly enough, I don't exactly know what the dollar amount is now or what it was, but I kind of know with the numbers. The state sets the salary to sit here, and that was a substantial increase, I believe. So, that could be budgeted extra. That was when you were elected, you received a certain amount, and now it's more, and I think that there's certain things, like I said, if someone ran for office and couldn't afford the travel, they are getting a salary. But the things that they have to do, they have to take the ethics class. For enrichment, they could take a new commissioner's orientation, but this covers it. You know, this covers the things that they have to do. And the public, honestly, they don't care if everyone goes to Tallahassee or goes to the chamber events. And I'm certain that they wouldn't want in-county travel. And it is their money. That's just how I look at it. It's their money, not ours. And we can use some of that, but I think a lot of the enrichment, some of it is good for the county. And let's face it, some is just networking. It's good for, you know, self and political reasons. And we have local elected officials. We can reach our representative, our state rep and our congressional rep and our senator. I mean, they're all not only a phone call away, but we could have a face-to-face within a small radius, so.
Okay. Y'all have partially convinced me. I do think it should go up a little bit, but we can move on.
What's that?
I said we can move on. I will say that I still run my company, just like the rest of us do. And when I go, I just want to make, since this has turned into a very long conversation and we have media in the room, that I take a giant portion out of my life to go to this travel, meaning it's a lot of effort physically. It takes a lot out of my schedule to do this. I don't do it for fun. I do it because I believe very strongly that I am bringing back things to the county that is worth the expenditure. I hope everyone understands that.
So is the consensus to bring travel back to 3,200 and registration back down, or are we looking at registration runs for 1,000?
I'd like to see 5,000 and 1,000.
My suggestion would be to keep it at the 3,200. And if we want to raise the registration to 1,000, I would be okay with that.
Commissioner Bays?
I'm fine with that.
So 3-1, you got your direction. Excuse
So-
me. Wrong pipe.
Slide 22 talks about the special revenue funds departments, specifically business license, which is actually economic development, and utility regulatory, which is the utility reg office. If you look at it, that is one of those positions we discussed was added for utility reg. And then obviously there is some increase due to pay in class. If we just didn't look at personnel expenses, it would be 4.6%. There's also an increase in reserves. And so if we don't include reserves, the budget would actually decrease by 4.7%.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Why are we increasing reserves $500,000?
I don't think it's
Am I
half a
looking
million.
at the,
I think it's 121,000.
I'm looking at the wrong,
Page 22.
oh, sorry about that.
Did we flip too
I
fast?
flipped to the next page. Sorry
Don't
about
scare
that.
us like that.
I'm like, wait a minute here.
No.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, well, I guess same question, we're going up 10% in reserves, is that absolutely necessary?
Well, I think part of that reserve is from utility regulations where they pay those fees and then it goes into its own account. It can only be spent for certain expenses.
Okay,
So as time goes on and as we didn't have a person in that position, it's just continued to accumulate.
Okay, so if you're telling me that it's absolutely necessary, then I will support it.
It's non-general fund. It's non-general fund as well. It's because of the fees. And there are things which, to a point, that this wasn't being done. So we're trying to reorganize that and get that to where things hadn't been done since 2019. So we're getting that to where it needs to be at.
Okay.
Slide 23 talks about Visitor and Convention Bureau. They have their own balance and reserve policy that is under an AR that they have to follow. And that is 60% of their operating budget. So that is what goes into their reserves. If you look, we kind of put down there, the special project budget has approximately 1.4 million in there. They did get some adjustments for pay and class. And with that it would be an 8.6% increase. But we wanted to let you know that we had been informed that the TDC had reviewed this budget request for fiscal year 24. However, administration will be reviewing it themselves prior to it coming back in September. The next slide.
Oh, sorry, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Since tourism has been such a controversial issue, and we just talked about travel for us, what exactly is the standard for travel for them? And how?
Yeah, I know what Aaron had indicated. We are going to really do a deeper dive on that budget and learn more about that. Obviously, I think they've submitted some travel requests for next year. Those are things we want to look at and analyze. Obviously, we're currently in transition there, so I want to have some more opportunity to actually look at that closer and examine that. And I feel confident before we get to the next couple budget opportunities as we have discussions, I'll be at a better arrived at a better understanding of some of those details.
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Commissioner Finnegan.
To Mr. Howard's point, just so we're all on the same page, so whatever is in this budget right now will be subject to change. So if we're wondering or have issues or have questions, we can just hold on to that because this will change.
Yes, and if you have them, you can bring them forward to me at any time you'd like to, as we go through this. That's just going to give me more time to be able to examine this and look at it a little closer.
Thank you.
The next slide goes over community services. They're supported by ad valorem, special revenue funds, and special taxing districts. The next slide talks about the ad valorem supported departments. They are listed below. Again, pay and class, you'll see up there, there's quite an increase in personnel expenses. So it would be, if we took that out, the increase would be 9%. However, there is also $760,000 that is in CIP for some projects that is showing on this slide. And that includes a Fort Island Trail beach parking grant, a Holden Park maintenance storage facility, and an LED light conversion over at Central Ridge. Then you'll see the information about the barge canal. That was, I believe, 2.75 million that have been in the CIP. And then you'll just see there's a little note that we don't have the final engineer's estimate. So those are, what caused that increase. I know we discussed barge canal a little bit yesterday, and I know there was some information given out. So I didn't know if you had any additional direction regarding barge canal going into next year.
Commissioner Canal.
Yeah, sorry about that. I guess after digesting it a bit, it's my understanding that money was pulled from this budget because we don't have permits, and we can't do anything without permits. Now, hopefully, those are forthcoming. Oh, what do we have here? Okay. Well, obviously, I mean, we just got this. A timeline that takes it to not being under construction until, starting construction until 2026. Now, just having this, not being critical, but just dropped in my lap now, quite frankly, board, I find that unacceptable. If we're anticipating that we're nearing 100% design on phase 1 and 2, and we're anticipating that permits could be 6 months, hopefully not as long as a year. I would like for us, maybe it needs to be a workshop.
Yes.
Maybe there needs to be a presentation in a normal board meeting, but we need to have a more lengthy conversation about how to get this project rolling much sooner than February of 26. If we have got 100% design and permits in hand, say by next summer, which doesn't seem unreasonable, we need to be planning for that and getting shovels and tractors and whatever else we need out there to get them moving and get this project rolling. I would sure hate to think that that we've got a design and permit in hand in June of 24 and we're sitting on it until February of 26. So those would be my thoughts. Obviously not necessarily for today's discussion, I don't think, but anyway.
So do you not want me to say anything? Not for today's discussion. I was just about to discuss. I'll throw it out there anyway. It looks like there's some gaps. So worst case scenario, it seems like, well, I guess in about a year, if it takes permits, it starts the ball rolling. Can't talk today. It's spring 2024. I'm not sure what the gap is. You know, we're all the way to August 2025. That it seems like that's the big gap to when we get bids. It looks like in April we're supposed to receive Restore Act funding and then apply again the next. I don't really understand. How do you receive in April? Oh, I'm looking at it backwards. Okay, I just got this myself. I'd like to blame it on I'm not wearing glasses. I'm gonna pause and take a minute to look at this.
I just have one quick question. Is there something between April, so do we have to get the Restore Act funding before the ITB? Is that the issue?
So when we go out to bid, generally they only hold the price for so long. So if we don't have the funds to open the purchase order, then going out to bid is.
But if we have the funds in reserve, we could go ahead and start that though, and then get the Restore funding? Would
Yes,
that take a year out?
Well, and hopefully, I know part of that, I don't know if you want.
Mary and Carl or somebody in the audience, but
Yeah,
one thing I think what Commissioner Kennard indicated, we definitely need a workshop. There's some things I've looked at in the last 24 hours that are urban legend with a variety of this projects been going on from 2004, 2005. I had a good discussion with the Coast Guard a couple weeks ago, and I actually asked them, I said, what's your timeline when I see you all there on the barge canal? And they said, Steve, I'll be honest, it's going to be probably 2.5 years. And I said, why is it taking you so long? External permitting. So there's some of those issues we need to do. I'm concur with Commissioner Kennard. I like to get stuff done and move it. I often say I don't want this to be citrus DC. How do we get to yes? There are some external factors here, but I do think that we need a good workshop on it to walk through the past, the present. There's also, quite honestly, I would love to see the state get involved in this with appropriations, and maybe this restore money is not, the best option. Maybe it is an option, but maybe it isn't. But it could hold us up. I think you even indicated yesterday, Aaron, that it took forever to get the grant application. So it's a process that you're kind of being held hostage. This is a strategic, I think, priority. I think that barge canal, because of the Coast Guard now making that presence. So you're starting to see that. I'm with you. We need shovels out there. We need to have a can-do attitude. How do we get it done? I asked staff last night. We need to lean on I think, the state and on the federal agencies to expedite these permit reviews, which are challenging at best to get through those. But that would be fantastic to have a workshop to kind of go back in the future and where's some gaps, where can we accelerate to get this thing moving quickly and swiftly, and what does that look like? So I definitely concur, we need a workshop to work through all those details.
I have a question.
Commissioner Bays was next.
Well, I will tell you, I believe this takes a U.S. Corps of Engineering permit.
It does. It does, and they have, according to staff, that's been filed in 2022 with SwiftMud in the Corps. So that was done already. They're almost at like 100% design. One of the other trip hazards, which Aaron will talk about, is that at some point, even if you get the 100% design, we could go for that grant, but this board will have to do a committal letter of $5.5 million to be able to do that. So there's a lot of pieces to this, to get you to the finish line. But at the end of the day, we need this shovel ready. Because if it's shovel ready, as you start seeing dirt turning and seeing activities out there, this will become a catalyst event. I am convinced of that.
Well, as I said yesterday, I like this project and I think the sooner the better, but I do believe that considering this takes a Corps permit, I can tell you I had lengthy discussions last week with 3 former DEP secretaries. There was the United States Corps at the meeting that I was at. 2 to 4 years for a permit. I mean, and they're in no hurry right now. They're holding up the permits that are needed in Kings Bay and Homosassa. And I begged, borrowed, and pleaded with everybody there. And they're just, Herschel Vineyard, who is the former DEP secretary for the state. I spoke with him at length. He's very good friends with the U.S. Corps director, and they're not moving. I mean, it's being held up. So I don't know, what to expect on this, but I would, based on everything that Commissioner Kennard said yesterday and moving along in this process, I guess I think there's a bigger plan here. The state owns that property. We have, what's the cutter moving in?
The what?
The cutter.
Coast Guard.
Coast Guard
Yeah.
moving in.
Yeah.
I think our partnership with that, I think there's a lot of upfront work that we can do. And I wouldn't mind, I don't think it's going to happen, but I think giving us that year to work through our legislative delegation to maybe get some money and partner with the state on this and do it right. I don't want to take it off the radar, but I think because of this budget cycle, I think if we can just move in that direction, that we're going to continue to work on this. But I think I think that should be one of our legislative priorities.
I
To
agree.
work
Yes.
there, help work with the state to get some funding since they own this property, and whatever happens. I can tell you back in 2012 or 13, somewhere maybe 14 in that zone, we actually had a presentation to have a marina come in and design and build there. I think that should be something that we go back and look at. It shouldn't just be a boat ramp. We should think bigger than that. I think that's worthy of resurrecting and take this to the next level. We know that with the boat ramps, we have one additional that's being closed down, and with our manatee protection zones, we are not allowed to open it. This is our only hope for another boat ramp, in my opinion. And I think when we do this, we need to go big. We need to think outside the box and do it right. And it is sorely needed in this county. But I think if you would indulge and we can kind of take this money out of the budget for this year and get
Yeah.
the legislative appropriation and work on it from that end, I think that is the course of action that we should be taking.
Yep, I'm fine with that.
Got one more thing. One thing I think, you all do a great job. I said this county, I've been amazed with the appropriations you get from the state level. And our congressman, I think, is doing amazing work. I actually had coffee with him a couple weeks ago, brought this project up, the importance of that. But I'd strongly encourage this board also to create federal priorities. So we have state priorities, but let's develop federal priorities as well. And I think this would fall in that category. So we need to go after both, let's go aggressively after the federal, just like we go after the state. And I think there's a great opportunity with both of those coming together. And I'm convinced there's money out there. We just got to get our hands on it and grab it. And this is a good story to tell now with the Coast Guard coming there. I think that's the catalyst opportunity.
Okay. Aaron?
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. I had a question about the 3.2 million. Now that I see the timeline doesn't flow, it zigzags up and down. Is that 3.2 million restore, it says pot 3, is that money that we've already received, or is that the money that we're applying for in April of 2024?
That would be the funding we're applying for.
Okay. Thank you.
Slide 26 goes over special revenue funds.
I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, you still have another question?
I do, yeah. Because, and the reason why I ask, this whole thing's got me tripped up that we just got here. It says funding identified, and it's almost like we already received it. It says restore pot 3, and then, but it says that we've identified the funding already, and that this is how we need more.
So when we did the project with Restore, and this was years ago, we thought that would fund the entirety of the project. And so when we put in for the project, those funding amounts, we kind of said, we're going to match it. Like, you're going to give us 3.2 and we're going to kick in this amount of money. So even if we go and we get the 3.2, they're going to expect us to put in that much. That's really moot at this point because we would have to put in millions and millions of dollars. So, but okay.
So you're saying when we apply for this in April 2024, what you're saying when we applied for this, we had to match, but this is April 2024.
When they had to do a state expenditure plan where you put in all of the projects, you had to request funding for the projects and you had to tell them how it was going to be funded. I think this was back in like 2017, 2018. So we said, this is how much it's going to cost and we're going to kick in or match this amount. And so that's what they'll expect when we put the application in. However, when we go to put the application in, it's going to be a $10 million project. So we'll far exceed that.
Okay, thank you.
And just for clarification, the phase 1, when I went back and looked at the historical documentation with staff, that phase 1 was approved in November 2022 before the board. And direction was given to go forward and work on phase 1 based on what they were able to accomplish within that budget constraint.
Sounds like we need a workshop.
Yes.
Okay, Aaron?
Slide 26 is the community service departments that are special revenue funded. Again, those are listed at the bottom. Those do include animal services and the animal shelter, as well as library impact fees, park impact fees, and then some of the courts, boat launch fees, and boating improvement. So there is an increase. Some of that is, again, related to paying class. Without that, it would be 7.4% increase. However, a large portion of that is reserves, and there's a note down there that talks about the park and library impact fee budget reserve accounts have increased approximately $710,000. So as you know, they will sit and reserve in the impact fee until there's a project identified to use that. The next slide, 27, is the library taxing district, which is the libraries. This, again, we kind of briefly went over this morning. It includes personnel services or operating a reduction they have in capital outlay. And then they have a little bit reduction in reserves, the overall increase being 10.8%. The next slide starts public safety. Again, it goes over how they're funded, which is a special taxing district, special revenue funds, and an enterprise fund. The first slide is fire rescue. That includes fire rescue, their CIP, and their training center. In order to keep their millage at 0.5780, which is a millage they have this year, it would require 2/3 vote or all 4 votes of the board. Some of their taxing does not touch the cities, so they don't get the increase that the other millages do to only require a majority vote. If we had to reduce it down to just a majority vote or 3 votes, it would go down to 0.5554 and a decrease of approximately $265,000. I know after another slide or two, Chief Stevens is going to come up and address the board. The next slide for fire. Oh, I'm sorry.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
if we go with the majority vote to reducing the millage rate to 0.5554, this says a budget decrease of 265, but that's not actually a decrease in their budget. The budget still is increasing. It's just not increasing as much. Is that correct?
Right. So they've done their budget based on the millage staying the same. So they would potentially have to look at their budget for fiscal year 24 and reduce some of it.
Okay.
The next fire slide talks about their impact fees and the vehicle trust. And it just is showing you that there were some reductions, and I believe Chief Stevens will address, they have received a new truck. The next slide is for emergency medical services. And again, you'll see personnel services is a large amount. However, their reserve has gone down a bit, and so has capital outlay. Unfortunately, EMS, as you'll see on the next slide, is funded by the fees that they bill for their services, as well as a subsidy that the board provides that is currently 0.2 of a mil. When we were looking at their budget, to get their budget to balance, there were some things they had to consider to bring that budget in balance. The next slide lists some of those items, and I believe Chief Stevens is going to come up to address that.
Morning, Commissioners. So some of the things that we are having some issues with on EMS, going back to the Nature Coast days, would be the stretchers and some of the equipment. As you know, that equipment is essential to us providing those services. So one of the number one things that we have to consider is looking at some type of sustainment for equipment. There's 2 ways that we can do this, and you know, Chief Ellis did a lot of work with Stryker, which is our provider of our stretchers, the loaders that are inside the ambulance, the stair chairs. They also provide us with our cardiac monitors and the Lucas device, which we just got awarded for the AFG. One of the problems is primarily the stretchers. The stretchers are, you know, they were put together inappropriately, should we say, by Nature Coast. They did the work themselves, and Stryker doesn't guarantee that work unless they actually do the work, okay? So to kind of preface this for you, a loader and a stretcher in the back of an ambulance costs $60,000, okay? And we need to replace those because all of them are pretty much outdated. We do have some of the newer ones that came in with the new ambulances, but most of them are out of date. You're supposed to technically replace them every 10 years. The 2 programs that we were looking at, one of them would be for us to outright buy the stuff that we need to buy, which is $1.3 million. Okay. Stryker also has a program, which is a kind of a lease program for that equipment, and they provide you 3 products at this price that I'm going to give you, but they provide us with the stretcher, the loader, and the stair chair. And that we pay $445,000 for 10 years. you get 2 replacements of all the equipment within that 10-year span. Plus, you also have your service agreement and your warranties. Okay? One of the big things with stretchers and the stair chairs is the liability that comes with those. If we drop somebody and it's our employee's fault, then obviously the risk is on us. If the stretcher fails, then obviously, as long as we're under a service contract with Stryker, Stryker assumes that responsibility. So what we're trying to do is maintain that to where if the stretcher fails, it doesn't fall back on the liability of the county, if that makes sense. So the 2 options that we have for the equipment, for EMS equipment, would be to either go towards purchasing it outright at $1.3 million, or we could do that lease agreement for 10 years at it's just shy of $445,000 a year. And it's called the ALS 1 program that Stryker has. Or I'm sorry, the ALS 360. This equipment, as I said, is used daily. Stryker comes in and services it for us on a regular basis. As I said, the equipment that we had to have Stryker come in and somewhat update it. They've been gracious to us and have done that. And kind of put it back into par. It will last, maybe another year, Greg? Yeah, we're good for like a year, but beyond that, we've got to do something. And I don't want to get in the next year and be scrambling to try to do this. Yes,
Commissioner Bays?
If you were to purchase those outright, what's the lifespan?
So the lifespan of those right now would be 10 years if you bought it new, okay? However, when you buy that, you get a 5-year service agreement that comes with it. So $60,000 is the cost of the product, not the cost of the service plan. So there's more money attached to the service plan.
So it's 1.2 to buy.
$1.3 million to buy all the product and the service agreement.
That includes the service agreement.
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
Well, I I understand the
But that gives-
liability issue, but here's my thing. If you're telling me it costs 1.3 for a product over 10 years, but they want to charge us $440 some odd thousand dollars for a
$445.
contract every year?
Correct. But again, you get 2 replacements of all the equipment, plus that includes your service plan and warranties. So there is a difference. My preference would be to buy it outright, because we'd save the taxpayers money.
That doesn't even, that's crazy. You're
But
going to
we
spend
wanted to make sure-
$1.3 million to buy it and it has a service plan with it.
Right.
And the lifespan's 10 years. Or you could lease it and have a service plan, but it's going to cost you $4.8 million.
Or even potentially more, because if you want to own that equipment after the lease, you have to buy it out.
Well, I completely agree with Commissioner Bays. Thank you for bringing that up. I would say that certainly, obviously they're charging that. Like you said, there are differences, but you're advocating for what we would automatically want to advocate for. So I think that's a.
Yeah, and I just wanted to make sure you guys had some options on
Yeah.
that. As we talk about I guess I should stay in order with what you guys have. We talk about the elimination of the 12-hour paramedic and the 12-hour EMT. We try to measure our benchmarks or our status of the EMS units by unit utilization hours. So we identify how much is that truck when they're on duty, are they on a call? Okay. So the industry standard is for anything that's over 40%, you need to put out another truck. Does that make sense? So anytime they're on calls, 40% of the time they're on duty, you should technically bring up another truck. Right now, we just recently did the month of June, and with the current units we have, which would include that unit that we have to look at potentially losing, we're at 50% for June, 50 hours, or 50% for our unit utilization hours for all of our units, close to it. So I think our average was 44 that correct? So 44. So we're over that benchmark. We do have some potential savings that we want to bring forward that we have to talk about later for this upcoming budget. But it involves some strategic planning, and we have to really dig deep into it, and we have to make sure that you guys are on board with that, which will hopefully pay for those people. The replacement of the ambulances is, as you know, the cost of everything's gone up. We have to maintain, we did a really good job at bringing the fleet up to par, okay? And as you guys know, the fleet was way below par when we took it over. Looking at the serviceability, looking at the utilization of the ambulances, the hours, and the mileage, our recommendation, based on our fleet plan that we put together, is that we're going to need to purchase 2 ambulances every year moving forward, okay? Because an ambulance isn't like a fire truck. An ambulance almost needs to be replaced every 5 years. So you want to get into that cycle so we don't have that big bump in the budget moving forward where we've got to buy 6 or 7 ambulances, if that makes sense. So we'd initially put in the budget for 2 ambulances for a fleet replacement plan, and that's, close to $560,000 for 2 ambulances today. We do need to look at that. Do we need to purchase them now? No, but we need to look at the future and make sure that we're ready to purchase them. For example, right now it's taking 24 months for us to, if we put in an order for an ambulance today, it's taking 24 months for that build to come through. So we're not even going to be paying for it until the following year if that happens. Does that make sense as far as the time it takes to build an ambulance? And that's primarily because of the manufacturers for Ford, GMC, or even the Chevy or Dodge. The chassis are hard for them to get right now.
Tell me again, how many ambulances do we currently have?
Currently, we have 17, which includes our reserves.
And how many do you need for the proper utilization ratio of 40% or below?
So right now, we're bringing up 13 ambulances during peak times. Okay? Most of the time, give or take, we go down to 10 when it's non-peak time. So you have 10 ambulances that are out there 24/7. And then during peak time, we bring up another 3 ambulances.
Okay.
So they don't work, those 3, what we call high-performance trucks, they're not on duty 24/7. They come up during those peak hours when we need them. And that's what the 12-hour positions are for.
So if they have a lifetime of 5 years, we should be doing how many per year? 2, 3?
Based on what we've looked at, and the serviceability is 2 every year.
Well, that's always my preference with these sort of things, so we don't have big swings up and down, is to put the money aside and just continually roll with it to make sure that we are adequately, especially in public safety, adequately equipped. But
And my goal would be to at least place the order now, because like I said, we're not going to be paying for those ambulances for another 2 years.
so does it need to be in the budget, Aaron,
No.
from a legal perspective?
I believe it requires, I believe Keith said a letter. Is that
Letter of
correct?
intent.
So you all would be required to sign some letter, and I don't know if the attorneys looked at it yet or not.
But
It's,
yeah, and my understanding, I believe, is that when those ambulances come up, are preparing to roll out, we can actually decline and they just bump to the next person.
correct.
Yes.
That's correct. Because they're in such high demand right now.
Commissioner Finnegan?
Thank you. Going back, because you're saying about delaying these things, and like you said with the ambulances, you need to, put in sooner than later if you're expecting to get them later. What about with your replacement equipment that you said if you bought it 1.3 million? Is that readily available, or do you need to be thinking long-term ahead for that equipment also?
Right now, there's not as many delays in the equipment as there is in vehicles. 12 months for us to get the equipment.
And when we're talking about big bites, and I completely agree with Commissioner Bays, if we spent 1.3 million and that was with service contracts and everything was good for 10 years, if you did the 4.42, I mean, if we did the first option, we would save taxpayers $3.12 million.
So that, let me back up, because the service contract with that 1.3 would be good for 5 years. The equipment is good for 10 years, okay? So we'd have to purchase either another service contract or upgrade the equipment.
How much would the other service contract be for the remaining 5 years? About 60,000?
60,000 per year?
That sounds like a good deal for our taxpayers. And then my further question was, if we didn't want to do, and you would have to tell me how your equipment is, could we do half of that, in a year and another half another year? I don't know how you need to stage that.
Whatever
but-
we can do to make it happen. And, it's, we even discussed the fact of not going in and buying everything at the beginning of the budget year and kind of, transitioning into being able to purchase this stuff.
I think buying the equipment is more fiscally prudent way to go for our taxpayers.
And then one of the other things, miscellaneous renovations, we have one of the stations that we needed to actually put an extra bathroom in it. And it's actually the Station 8 station, which is the one that we want to relocate to the airport. The problem is we only have one bathroom in that station.
That's a problem. Why?
That is a problem because obviously with EMS and fire, we have different sexes working in the station, having to utilize one bathroom. So,
Yes.
Let's talk about your funding. So fees are generated from services, but it's subsidized by the general fund.
correct. So fees are generated from the revenues of our billings, our medical billings that we collect. So our billables were 12 million. Our billables from if we go back to a good time frame for us to use right now would be March of 2022 to March of 2023 because of the billing cycle. You have your 90 to 180 days for people to pay their bills. So looking at that, our billables were give or take $12 million, but we only collected like $8.9 million because of contractuals, because of what insurance pays, or even what the taxpayer actually pays when they pay their bills. Our collection rate with our current billing company, I think, is sitting at 62%. We are looking to try to increase that number. We would like to be in the 80s, which would put us in a much better state. So we have some plans in progress right now that we're looking to fix that. And as you may or may not know, we're also the current billing companies we're conducting an internal audit with the clerk's office on that.
What's industry standard for collectibles?
Collectibles usually 75%, give or take. I would say, Jason, 72 to 75%. Right now we have looking at their surrounding counties, our most comparable, because Sumter County just started, would be probably Hernando, and Hernando's sitting at like 90% collection rate right now. That would be ideal for us to be there, but.
And what seems to be the biggest obstacle in that collection?
I think obviously our biggest obstacle is what the insurance pays and what Medicaid and Medicare pay, and that's their contractuals that they pay. And then of course we also, we are not a wealthy community because people will pay their bills. However, they can't pay all of that bill at one time. So they may potentially be able to make a payment, which kind of violates what our policy is right now. But I think a combination of that. Jason, did you want to say anything about that? Did I miss anything? And then, of course, there's, the people that are doing the billing, they really control a lot of that. And like I said, we have a plan to try to fix some of that. That's in progress, and hopefully we can change that in October.
Okay.
You done? Commissioner Kennard?
Chief, I'm not going to get into the weeds with you managing how you spend the money that the board gives you.
Yes.
I feel like it's our job to get you a certain amount of money that the board can give, and how you handle it from there is up to you. I will tell you where I am a little bit sideways with this. I did not support the county taking over EMS from Nature Coast. I didn't vote for it. I felt like it was going to be quite a budget buster, if you will. At the time, Nature Coast, that's water under the bridge. Apparently not totally with me, but at the time, Nature Coast had a supplement of somewhere around 300, and then it was bumped up to 600, and then they came back to us and were looking for to increase that to $1 million, and board got upset. We said, that's it. We're not doing that. We're taking over EMS. We can do it better. The argument at the time that I heard was that it was going to require somewhere between a $1 and $2 million supplement for us to run EMS. Now we're looking at, after the 5% reserves, we're looking at a 2.5, almost a $2.6 million supplement. And there was a conversation at the time that there were other agencies that, because of their billings with EMS, they were actually producing a net profit, if you will. Mm-hmm. And I'm not seeing any of that.
Yep.
So as we had a tough discussion with the sheriff, and we had a just tough discussion amongst ourselves, there's more to come. I think there's some pencil sharpening that needs to happen here, and we need to come up with some better numbers so that ultimately we can lower the proposed millage rate on our taxpayers. You're going to get, in my eyes, you're going to get the best that we can give you, and however you feel like you need to spend that, I have the utmost confidence in you doing that. I'm not going to get into whether you should buy stuff or lease stuff, or
right.
I don't know anything about ambulances or fire trucks or that type of stuff. But I have a problem with the numbers right now.
Okay.
I mean, we can meet privately and discuss that. But right now, I think these numbers need to be reduced. We need to find some savings there, additional savings there.
And then, do you want me to talk about fire at all?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so, fire budget cuts. One of the big things is obviously salaries. Fire was not included in the pay plan with Evergreen. So our goal would be able to have a little bit more money, obviously, in salaries to go in and negotiate their compensation. And the main reason for that is the compression between fire and EMS. We want to try to make, at least comparable rates. I have, officers on the fire side supervising people, some of the people making more money than they are. Which, granted, different jobs, I get it. But we need to try to bring that a little bit closer. One of the other things is we're trying to get a generator at the admin building. That's obviously, that's a big chunk of change, is $140,000 to put the generator at our admin building. But obviously during a storm or some type of disaster, we're going to need to do that. And then the other biggest thing that we're looking at is we've got to replace the air packs at the fire training center. They're outdated. They're hand-me-downs from years ago. And of course, they're just not serviceable anymore. The people that we have come in and service them, unfortunately, said that they're to the point that they just can't find parts for them or service them anymore. So we've got to find like 20 air packs for the fire training center, which is, it's about $200,000 for that. You had mentioned some of the things with the sheriff as far as what we pay for CAD. So fire pays $100,000 plus $25,225 for CAD, and then EMS pays $100,000 plus $100,000 plus $23,264 for a total of $248,519. We pay for 4 dispatch positions on the fire side and 4 dispatch positions on the EMS side for a total of $474,136. And then we also pay $80,000 for the radio service agreement and upgrades, for a total of, we pay the sheriff close to $802,000 per year for CAD, radio service, and dispatch positions.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Kennard.
Chief, that, the CAD system, again, if my memory serving me correctly, that was more of a, is that more of a record-keeping system? Or that's the Motorola 911 system that the sheriff
That's the
referenced?
computer-aided dispatch system that
Okay.
they purchased.
So that's the $319 that he's paying, and for that particular system?
That's
And-
what we budget. I don't know how the money gets transferred and all that stuff. Aaron can fill you in on that, but what we budget for are those numbers.
Okay, so based on the slide that he showed us, he's telling us that he's got I think it was 319 in there for that Motorola 911 system.
Yes.
And you're telling me that between fire and EMS, we're paying $254,000, is that correct?
$248,000.
248,000. Sorry, my hearing's leaving too.
That's okay.
All right, thank you, Sarah, I appreciate it.
And any other questions, anything that I can address?
I'm good, thank you.
No,
Thank you,
I'm
Chief.
good.
Thank you.
The next slide starts growth management. They are ad valorem supported as well as enterprise fund. The first slide talks about the ad valorem supported departments. That's administration, code compliance, and land development. Again, and I'm so sorry, I keep saying pay and class study, but without that, it would be a 2.6% increase. There is also $40,000 budgeted this year, and that is related to a new vehicle for the growth management director. The next slide is the enterprise funds, building vehicle trust, and building technology. As we discussed earlier, at least in the budget that we have right now, there are 6 positions. I believe they're going to be coming back to the board asking for 9. And they're changing the titles. So we did put some of the titles down there, but I believe those are also changing. However, it will transition the call center that they currently have from temporary to permanent. So without looking at personnel and reserves, they would have only had a 2.88% increase. And again, that's something that will be brought back to you and you all can discuss with Eric when he brings it to a board meeting. And then whatever decision is made, that will be changed in the budget and reflected in September. So whatever positions.
So 2.88 was without pay and class and without the additional positions?
And without, it's without the pay and class and without the reserves. So they have, their reserve balance is also growing. And I believe Eric's here.
And the 9 positions, they're going to change this to 9 before the budget
I believe
season is
he
over? But we only have 6 baked into these figures.
Right. So when we did this at the time, there were only 6 that we had been made aware of. And last week we got an email saying it would actually be 9 and there's different titles related to them.
Okay.
Matter. But this is an enterprise.
It's an enterprise
Yes.
fund, and some of the things we're going to look at, and some of it's my fault because I'm putting things in there. But one of the things that I've identified is a long range planner position. You had that, I was told many years ago. Obviously, we need to be proactive. There's funding there. There's reserves there. So we need to spend that money appropriately because that's what the fees are generating that. We have to be proactive, be prepared for growth. You got growth. So part of that is trying to reorganize that. Also customer service. We're calling it ombudsman. I'm going to call it expediter, navigator, whatever we want to call it. But it's going to be a higher level of customer service, meaning that we can get this stuff done, help, and say we're open for business. But again, it's all enterprise money.
Outstanding. Commissioner Finnegan.
Yeah, it's an enterprise fund, so I would love to see the extra employees. I think they're sorely needed over there. My question is, because Aaron, you're saying 6 positions, but they were going to increase it to 9, but the budget that we have in the big book says 49 positions, but 45 were approved. So last year was 39, requested 49, recommended 45, unless I am looking at the wrong thing.
Oh, no, that would be correct. So if they had 39 approved for this year, is that what it's saying?
Yeah.
So then the 6 would go under the recommended and it would total 45. Because we only knew of 6 when we did this.
It says requested 49 for this year.
That,
was the department request, they asked for all the positions,
but that was back in March.
I just want to make sure, because they have a list of them, that they're getting what they need to operate smoothly.
Right, so in March, we have all of the departments provide us staff requests. They're not necessarily all approved. It goes to HR and then it goes to admin. So that was all of what was requested. However, as Mr. Howard just said, there were 6 that we knew of when we did this that were going to be approved. And now it's gone up to 9.
Going to go to 9. And part of that's having, obviously, Sam just hit the ground running technically yesterday. I've also asked him to take a good review as well coming in here. Obviously, he's used to high growth communities. So there's some opportunities to look at that as well. So we tried to do our best, but when I told staff, we don't want to just put positions in there. We want to make sure we're being as efficient and effective. If we need them, we need to have them. So we'll probably come back at a later date, but for now, I think we feel pretty confident that this 9 number will be the number we'll be utilizing.
Thank you.
The next slide starts Public Works. And again, it's just a breakdown of how those departments are funded. The first slide talks about the ad valorem supported departments. They're listed there. Obviously, the big ones would be road maintenance. There's a note at the bottom. As you can see, personnel services with the pay and class study received a very large increase. Without that, the increase in the budget would be 12.8%, but a majority of that was directed by the board. This is where that 0.4 mils for road resurfacing goes. So that's what you're seeing in this budget and that increase. The next slide is for stormwater. This is part of the MSBU. They did have a small change for personnel regarding pay and class. That would have only brought their increase down to 10.6%. However, their reserves have increased. And I know we had spoken about they are starting some projects. So that may or may not be the case as we get into next year, that it's still that high. However, without that increase in reserves, they would have actually had a decrease in their budget of 4.3%. So I know Mary was looking at a list of projects that they were recently starting, and I believe she said 2 were approved yesterday. Yes, 2 were on the meeting yesterday. The next slide is the enterprise funds. These are all of the solid waste funds that they have. They did get some bump from pay and class. And as you see that decrease of 32.3%, they're actually cash carrying forward over $16 million for the landfill expansion and their other projects. So it does look like a large decrease, but when we actually start the budget 10-1, we will cash carry forward those projects for them. The next slide is the Public Works Internal Service Funds. That includes fleet management, the Fleet Vehicle Trust, and the General Government Vehicle Trust. This includes 32 vehicles And that is actually on page 370 of those vehicles that will be replaced. The next
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Kennard?
I just wanted to clarify for folks that either in the audience or at home paying attention to this, that the 32 vehicles being replaced caught my attention, and I inquired about that. But apparently a vehicle can constitute a lawnmower or different
Other equipment.
pieces of equipment, not necessarily a four-wheeled or a six-wheeled vehicle. I thought, what in the world do we need to replace 32 vehicles in 1 year for? But
And
so I just
would-
wanted to clarify that.
One thing I'd like to just do a shout out for our fleet director. I have been impressed with Brian since I've been here. He does an amazing job, so I have a lot of confidence in his forecasting and what he's doing there. So I just want to shout out to him for the good job he does.
Brian Cope?
Brian Cope
Yep,
does
very
amazing,
good.
did amazing work for us.
And so just so you know, some of the items that are included on that list are pickup trucks, but there's also tractors, sprayers, a vac sweeper, a vibrator or vibrator roller. I'm guessing that has to do with road resurfacing. A loader, a light duty dump truck, and a mower.
Okay.
So.
And just for clarification, this is also a vehicle trust fund where we actually sequester a portion of these funds in there every year for replacement. So it's not,
Yes.
Yeah, it's a program that you put together.
Excellent.
The next slide is for the special revenue funds departments, and those includes the MSBU's, aquatic vehicle and maintenance trust, fishing improvement, gas taxes, road impact fees. Looking at this, they will also have cash carry forward projects totaling over $7.8 million. So that will get rolled into next year's budget. When looking at the gas taxes, and I know we had mentioned this during CIP and during other budget presentation, gas taxes and those projects, there's a finite amount of funding that we're receiving for gas taxes. So unfortunately, Public Works had put together their CIP with the projects they thought needed to be done. However, they had to revise that list to come in at the revenue that is actually going to be projected to be received by gas taxes. And then this also has a note about that part-time ground maintenance tech 2 positions that the Beverly Hills MSBU had approved. The next slide is water resources. Again, they received a large jump in personnel services due to pay in class. So their budget would actually have been reduced even more to 19%. They also have cash carry forward totaling $8 million, and then they usually have a significant amount of purchase orders that are rolled for their projects. So we would expect Northwest Quadrant to be rolled, Cambridge Green, some of those other projects. Those POs will then be rolled into next year. The next slide is administrative support. These are ad valorem supported. This is GIS, Human Resources Management and Budget and Systems Management. Personnel services, obviously affected by paying class. There were some operating expenditures that increased slightly. So there was also a position, that temporary position we had talked about earlier in systems that was removed, that was put in during the transition when the individual was retiring. We brought someone on to cross-train. Excluding personnel services, we would actually have decreased our budget by 1%.
Madam Chair?
Commissioner Kennard?
I was not going to support hiring this additional person for the assistant position, I guess it is, but this is one that I'm told is we're hiring just for cross-training, and when current position, person in that position retires, that we're not gonna, this isn't setting the precedent for having two people in this position long-term.
No, actually, this position's going away this year.
What's that?
This position's going away this year.
Okay.
So it was a temporary, and now
Okay.
it's
All right.
it's
Sorry
being
about that.
taken out.
Misunderstood.
This goes away.
The next slide is non-operating budgets. This is administrative services, capital improvement, detention services, economic development, general fund, CIP, public safety, our reserve and transfers, the tax collector, and then you'll see ARPA. So some of what we wanted to point out is when you look at that reserve and transfer account, that includes that $7 million we were discussing, 5 for the sheriff. There's about 600,000 that's going to be transferred to the supervisor of elections that we had talked about. And there's a $1.5 million that insurance subsidy that we had discussed a few meetings ago that is also transferring out of that account. So that is why that one has increased so much. The next slide has additional non-operating budgets, including our debt service fund, street lighting districts, special assessments, insurance trust fund, miscellaneous special revenue funds, and miscellaneous impact fees. So other than libraries, parks, and fire. So as you can see, the impact fees have gone up. And again, they will sit in the impact fees until a project is selected for that. Then we have the slides regarding millage and millage rate considerations. So the first one we're going to ask the board for guidance with is the pay and class study. As we discussed earlier, it was the $13 per hour presentation that was provided by Evergreen. That was the study that was used, and that was what was input into the budget that you're currently looking at. So we wanted to make sure that is still the guidance of the board, that we are going to do the $13 per hour.
Madam
Commissioner
Chair?
Kennard?
There have been discussions previously about, or decisions made previously to hire a consultant to do this pay and class study, and also to come up with a plan to ultimately get to the mandated $15 an hour by a certain date. Both of those plans were put in place. I have supported both of them, and I will support implementing the plan that was brought to us for the pay and class study. But I understand the desire to bump immediately from $13 to $15 an hour. But that creates, I believe that's going to create additional problems, like I said, for those people who are already at $15 and $16 an hour. Now they're going to be looking for their bump as well. And the people who you are pushing to $15, I shouldn't say it. If this board decides to go that route and push these folks up to $15 an hour, then by, I think it's 26 when we're required to be at $15 an hour. At that point, they'll no longer be at $15 an hour. They likely could be at $17 or $18 an hour, or $19 an hour. This is all money. Why, would I like to pay everybody $15 an hour minimum? Yes, of course, and more. But again, we don't get to pay them that money unless we take it from the rest of those taxpayers first. And I don't support it. I understand the desire to do it, but I don't support it. I can't support it.
Commissioner Kennard, I agree, and I was not pushing that at all. Didn't bring it up once.
Yeah.
I would say that looking around corners, we're going to have an issue with all of the big box stores moving in that are all at $15. We're probably going to have a competitive issue. That being said, we paid for the paying class. We should follow their recommendations. And I absolutely agree, we're going to have compression issues if we knee jerk and bump it to 15. If we have competitive issues, we'll have to deal with it later. Commissioner Bays.
Well, I'm on the opposite end of this. The voters, this went to a ballot. The voters said that they wanted a $15 minimum hour wage by a certain date. When we're looking at other constitutional officers, we sit up here and make the decisions for all budgets. And when we have other constitutional officers that are already at $15 an hour, our employees deserve the same. We have people that are on the end of a shovel working in the heat, and I am going to stand by our employees. I think that we have set them aside for far too long, and I will not support staying there. The compression was done for the $15 an hour. As you said, we have plenty of retail stores coming in that are going to be paying this $15 an hour. We're going to have to get there at some point, and today's the starting point for me.
Commissioner Finnegan.
I'll throw another loop in it just to be completely different. I have said from sitting here that it seems like in the past and currently enterprise funds and the public work, or not public works, but the water resources and the landfill people that have their enterprise funds seem to still pay in line with how we pay, correct? That's always been, as far as minimum wage and things like that. I think if enterprise funds has the money, they could increase their people. And I know the argument was given before, well, that might not be fair to everyone. Well, let that be a continuing employment with the county. You know, I really want that job because that's an enterprise fund and they pay better. I'm going to work really hard in the entry level job I have in the county to get to that other job. I just think that's how business works out in the world, and I would like to see us work like that too.
Commissioner Kennard.
One point of correction, and I hope that it's not taken the wrong way, but this board has 2 employees. Both of our employees are paid very well. Both of our employees have gotten increased salaries. The directors go to the administrator and he brings it to us to request their budgets. We give them their budgets. I don't think it's up to us to say, you know, you need to use your money to do this, you need to use your money to do this. We did the pay and class study. We said that we would fund it, and I think we need to stick with that and let those budget directors figure out how they're going to use that in their individual departments.
Well, so basically you just said the same thing that I said. The budget directors can use in their individual departments, correct? And I agree with you with our 2 employees. I think sometimes they like to know the direction we're in or where our heads are, so.
We made a promise that last year when we made the big leap to help the sheriff get starting salaries up so that he could recruit and hire, and we said at that time that that we would do this pay and class study, and I remember distinctly having a conversation with Randy, and he says, "Don't do the study if you're not going to fund it." And I know there's been some conversation of folks that are not happy the way that it came out, but we paid for the study. I think we need to fund the study and not arbitrarily start throwing additional monies out there because we don't have it.
I just want to make that clear. I do think we should fund our pay and class study.
Yeah.
Absolutely. My point was, it seems like those other enterprise funds feel like they're limited, or I've heard that in the past, like they feel like they can't do anything more. And just my humble opinion that if they want to, go for it. If you've got the money, it's your budget.
Aaron, how much is it to do $15 an hour and millage? And then fixed compression? I want to put a
So-
number on it publicly.
When we looked at it, we were still waiting to hear back from Evergreen, but we did go ahead and look at the classifications and the pay grades, and we started at the bottom and we adjusted all of them. And it looked like it would come in right around $2 million, which is still within that $500,000. Obviously, we would need to hear back from Evergreen and have them adjust that to everyone so we could get a final, to the penny number. But from us looking at the scale, it looks like it would be about $2 million. And not all of that would be general fund, obviously. Some of that would be enterprise funds.
And the $500,000 is what we already said that we would fund for paying class, so that was rolled into that.
Right. We've kept a $500,000 aside, and that is just for the paying class and the insurance.
So for the purposes of going back to what I said at the beginning that, and Commissioner Kennard said as well, we need to bring it down. We don't need to do it at this meeting. But we're also missing one of our colleagues up here. And I think that her input would be important. So I would support leaving the $500,000 and saying that it may or may not go to raise everyone to $15 an hour. More discussion, I think, needs to be had because we need to, we're all, every single one of us in the county is suffering from inflation in every single aspect. We do need to fund some things. Commissioner Bay said it most eloquently earlier today about how many things that have gone unfunded for too long. And so we do have a lot that we need to do, but we also need to not break everyone's back doing it. So
then the consensus would be just leave it how it is now and then further discussion in September.
that would be my preference, yes.
Is that?
So I'm not disagreeing with you, I'm just pushing the decision down, that's all.
I hope we're not pushing it down, hoping for a third vote.
No,
But
that's not it at all. How
understood.
many times has Commissioner Schleba and I been against each other? Quite a few, actually. So,
So is there a consensus for that then? To rediscuss in September?
I think we've got consensus.
Okay.
I don't believe it's unanimous, but I think we've got consensus.
Okay. The next one is for EMS. Currently, we have the 0.2 mils for the subsidy for EMS, and as Chief Stevens came up and explained, there were additional items, including equipment and vehicles. Are we going to stay with the 0.2 mil subsidy, or is there any other additional funding the board would like to consider?
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Kennard?
I'm not happy that the 0.2 mils has got us up to 2.6 million, but I definitely would not support going over the 0.2 mils.
I concur.
Commissioner Figgins? Okay.
All right, leave it as this. The next one is for the transportation millage. Again, you all had established a guideline of 0.2 mils every year for the next 5 years to be added for road resurfacing, with the anticipated revenue of an additional $10 million by that 5-year period. This year, or going into fiscal year 24, there will be 0.4 mils, which equals approximately $5.4 million. Do you all want to continue the 0.4 mils and put the 5.4 in road resurfacing, or do you want to reduce the millage to just generate the additional $4 million?
Leave it at 0.4. We have a $188 million backlog on road resurfacing.
Yes, ma'am. Oh, I concur.
All
Yes.
right.
Commissioner Kennard, I'm pretty sure I know what you're going to say.
I apologize, I missed that
Stick
discussion, but
with
I
stick
hope
with
we're-
stick with 0.4 mils on the road resurfacing.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
The next one is Health Department millage. The reserve budget fund balance for the Health Department is approximately 130,000. This millage rate actually attaches or is part of the county's. So just so you know, we could possibly reduce that rate to reduce the millage in September. You don't have to decide now, but just so you know, that's
a place that we could cut. I know that Mr. Rubio, before he retired, had said that they need funds, and everybody needs funds. So I would hesitate to roll that back before I know what I'm cutting. But
okay.
Thanks for pointing that out.
We'll try to reach out and see if we can get somebody maybe for the September hearing from the Health Department.
That would be really helpful because we need intelligence on what we're voting on. Commissioner Kennard?
Well, it says here that we would be reducing the reserve budget. We would be reducing that by, what, roughly $60,000.
Right. So if we rolled back the millage, it would just be, they would generate less $68,000. So, but I don't know, if you want to speak to somebody from the Health Department, we can see if they have a plan for that funding. But we do know that their reserves are building. So
their reserves are still going to increase, just not as just 68,000 less of an increase.
right.
Well, then I say we do it.
Well, yeah, I'm just saying, I would like, absolutely have to cut. But I would just like to know if they had some big plan for that, because I know that Mr. Rubio had said that they had some serious needs in the Health Department. So I would like to hear from them what those are so we can judge whether to do the rollback or not on that. That would be my preference, but it's the will of the board. Do you have an opinion?
I do. Reduce it. It's reserves.
Okay,
I concur.
all right. You have your direction.
Okay. And the last one is the fire rescue millage. As we discussed earlier, the current millage rate would require a 3/4 vote or all 4 votes of the board. That millage, if we couldn't reach it and we had to go to the majority, would be a decrease. They may have to look at their budget to decrease it. So before we read off the millage for the motion, we just wanted to make sure, because if we're gonna not have 4 votes, then I need to change it.
Madam Chair, I would recommend that we stay with the current millage.
Thank you. Commissioner Finnegan? Commissioner Kennard?
I will support it for now. But that's not a promise for September for sure. I don't mean that as a threat, but we've got to find, I've been saying it the whole meeting, we've got to find ways to reduce this proposed millage rate.
What's everybody doing in August? Sharpening pencils? I
That's
believe.
right.
Commissioner Finnegan? Yeah, I think we're all on board for
Okay.
now.
All right.
And on the motion page, should that not be 8.2 on the bottom right corner?
Eight.
It says 8.2, it should be 8.9.
It's 8.9. So I believe now we have to do open to the public.
We need to do the, typically we do the motion first. Do we
Okay.
not?
So the motion would be to set the tentative millage rate for general fund, transportation, health department, libraries, and fire for fiscal year 23-24. Those millages are as follows. The general fund will be 7.0057 mils. The transportation fund will be .9860 mils. Health department will be .0564 mils. So that one needs to change up here. Library services 0.3147, which is what the library board suggested this morning. And fire rescue will be 0.5780 for the total millage of 8.9.
Yeah, you gotta deduct the health department change.
Oh. But I read out 0.0564. Hold on.
It's 0.005 difference, correct?
Let's see. 7. Just so it's totally right. It's gonna be 0.41. All right, 8.9408.
Okay, that's what I had. Excellent.
And then B would be the motion to approve and authorize staff to execute the certification of taxable value, which is DR 420, is the maximum levy calculation preliminary disclosure, which is the DR 420 MMPs, and tax increment adjustment worksheets, DR 420 TIFs for fiscal year 23-24 via electronic format, which is e-trim.
Okay. Who would like to make the motion?
I'll make the motion. Motion to approve as discussed.
Okay, we have a motion. Need a second?
I'll second. I do have a question.
Do you want the question before open to the public?
Excuse me?
Do you want to ask your question before open to the public?
Yeah, Aaron, we made some minor changes along the way. Is that reflected in this final 8.904?
That is just the reduction for the health department millage,
Okay.
when you said to take it to
Right.
the rollback.
And going back to the reduction in our proposed travel budget, a slight increase in it was a reduction from the proposed
Communications.
training registration fees.
Mm-hmm.
Is that reflected in this?
No, we'll go back and we'll calculate a total with all of it.
Okay.
So, and then that way, hopefully in September, we'll also have more guidance regarding some of the other direction. And so we can give you a final total of what you can reduce the millage by. So
Okay.
I know today you discussed there might be some other options of reducing the millage. So
Yep.
we'll bring that back in September as a final number.
Okay. All right. All right. I'm fine. Thank you.
All right. Would anyone like to speak at open to the public? Y'all know the rules. 3 minutes, fill out a green card, state your name for the record. And you get 5 minutes, I believe.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to talk to you this morning. My name is Mark Zaveska. I live on North Wagon Point in Pine Ridge, and I'm here to represent the 11,000 residents of Pine Ridge. Have a letter on file. We've already got the 5 minutes, so thank you for that. I'll be followed by Don Woods, one of my colleagues. He will also be representing the Pine Ridge Property Owners Association, and he'll provide a little bit more amplifying detail of some of the things I'm going to touch on right here. We've only had 48 hours to look at the budget. There's a lot of detail in it. And even with that, we find a lot of the numbers in there somewhat disappointing. With all the talk and ideas at various road workshops and other county commission meetings over the last 2 years, we expected to see a significant increase in the funding for residential roads and resurfacing. I'd like to start with the 2 mil increase every year, or 0.4 at this point in time. Commissioner Kennard gave a great explanation of that on how it would work. $2 million increase every year for 5 years to provide funding for residential road resurfacing, specific task for a specific purpose, amounting to about $2 million a year. So we saw $4 million in 22, we saw $6 million in 23, and we were kind of expecting $8 million in 24, and that's the number that was at the roads workshop. In any budget, the devil's in the details. When we examined the budget, what we found were a couple of interesting things that struck us. The 0.2 mil increase resulted in $4 million every year, not $2 million, as was expected. So that's the good news. There's more money in the budget coming from that. The other part, though, is we scrubbed the budget and looked, and it's difficult for us to understand in this budget summary, even though it's long, to differentiate between road resurfacing and potholes. But the best we could come up with is the increase from last year to this year is $1.7 million. That's the best we could find. 4 million minus 1.7, there's $23 million that we think should be dedicated towards those roads, just to honor the commitments made by the board. Now, the numbers can be spun, parsed, accounting ways of doing things. But if it stands, it would result in a breach of a promise from the county commissioners to the people of Citrus County on what we're supposed to do with that money. Now, nobody wants that. Nobody. But there's still time to change this. Each of the county commissioners has a letter from our board of directors stating our concerns and requesting regarding our residential roads. Key theme is if you fix the county problem, you fix the Pine Ridge problem. In that letter, we asked to fund the roads that on 25-year resurfacing cycle. That means about $74 million, 74 miles, and about $16.6 million per year. This budget isn't even close to that. The tsunami of bad roads is getting bigger, it's getting closer, and it's coming faster. And this budget doesn't do anything about that. There's been a lot of talk about that 25 years, and is that the right number or the wrong number? After 2 years of discussing this, the number we should fund it for should be on the tips of our tongue. We looked at the budget, or we looked at the data we got from the engineering division, and we saw that 25-ish years is about the time it takes to go from a condition 1 to a condition 10. 25-ish years, that's why we focused on that. Some of the county commissioners have said 20-year cycle. We would welcome that. Unfortunately, we don't see it in the budget. In the letter, we also talked about Pine Ridge roads. As a community, we have the worst roads in Citrus County. 65% of our roads require resurfacing at a cost of about $17 million. We routinely see zero funding in the budget. Over the last 20 years, 2 out of 3 years, we've seen zero funding. And when we get something, it's peanuts. Our roads are on a pace to be resurfaced once every 263 years. Once every 263 years. This budget would continue that. We also recognize that the county continue the long-term neglect. And so as a minimum, what we want is 3.8% of the total residential resurfacing budget. We have 7.6% of the residential miles. We only want 3.8% dedicated to Pine Ridge. That's in addition to any SCOP money or anything else. Thank you very much for your time and consideration of this matter.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'm sitting here and watching all this process that you folks are going through. And I gotta tell you, it's pretty amazing what you're having to deal with. And I've come to realize that there's many more problems than what just Pine Ridge has. But just to amplify those a little bit, I'm Don Woods. I live at 5520 Pine Ridge Boulevard. And regarding the roads, just as an update for you folks, another year has passed. We have more construction going on with possibly a new subdivision going in within our subdivision. We have the rainy season going and the roads are already marginal at best. The cracks in the roads are getting wider. There's imprints in the roads of traffic patterns sinking. The whole overall situation, our roads are deteriorating as another year has passed. We actually have roads that are bordering on unsafe in Pine Ridge. And that's pretty much the gist of what I'd like to say and make you folks aware of. We've met with a lot of people. We've talked to a lot of people. We were hoping we could get some change with the density rule. There was some talk about maybe some type of modification, to get that problem, if you will, somewhat resolved. I know it's a problem countywide, but in our case, because of the years that we were neglected, we're asking, I guess, for some sort of consideration for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? All right. Aaron, can you address how much is actually, or perhaps Ms. Jensen needs to address how much is actually going to residential road resurfacing annually right now?
I would have to look at it, and I don't know if Mary knows offhand.
Apparently she
Barb
does.
may know offhand.
We have great staff.
But that's Scott. So the 9,443,800.
Okay.
That's residential road resurfacing.
Yes.
So there's your answer.
Say that number again.
$9,443,800.
And Madam Chair,
Yes.
I believe the additional 2/10 that we've agreed on for this year, that would generate more than the 2 million. It's 3 point,
Yes, it
Three-
is going to generate
An additional-
Well, now we have $5,443,800. Is that 0.4 mils?
no, just the additional 2/10 of a mil. That was 3 million and change, I think. Okay,
Yeah, we just have it totaled, the 0.4 mils this year totals $5.4 million.
okay. All right, so last year's 2/10 of a mil, this year's 2/10 of a mil will total 5.4 million on top of what our previous road resurfacing budget was.
Right, which was $4 million.
Okay, all right.
So then,
I mean, we still got a long ways to go, but that's progress in getting there.
Commissioner Finken?
sorry, thank you. So it sounds like if those numbers are correct, if we need $16 million, we're almost there. We're close. In another year, we should be hopefully getting what we adequately need. Am I seeing that math correctly? Commissioner Bays is saying no. I mean, 9 million plus 5 million is 14 million. If we need 16 million to keep us on a 25,
I think we need about 22 million to keep us on a.
Yeah,
Well,
it's,
kick me while I'm being optimistic.
to be fair to everyone, everything's a moving target with inflation and
Sure.
the faster that they deteriorate, the more expensive they are to fix. So is that about right, Commissioner Bays?
Well, I'll say something probably wildly unpopular, but, the more we do, the less behind we get. And even if we're not there, if we could just do a little bit more, we are allowed to save at max 17% for reserves. I want to say the bottom number, Aaron, is 8%, right? Not that we want to do that. The last couple of years have been 16%. I think some years before that have been around 12%. I mean, it kind of fluctuates. I mean, if we saved at 15%, which is still good for reserves, I mean, how many millions of dollars would that generate? Would that be another $3 or $4 million?
We could get you the exact number, but yes, it would be a few $1 million.
Just to, And, uh-oh.
Are you done? Yeah.
Sure.
Commissioner Kennard? Now
not-
you've poked the bear.
It's not a horrible idea, and it has been discussed in the past up here. It's not even a bad idea until a storm hits. And when we do get hit by that storm, and we've got tens of thousands of people on the west side of 19, all of a sudden looking for a place to stay and looking at rebuilding infrastructure and things like that, as well as keeping the county running, then you want that 17 to 18% in reserves. The other part of this is that if the federal government stepped in and dropped 20 million in our laps today and said, go repave all your roads, we could certainly do that. And then in 25 years from now, we'd be begging them to drop another $20 million because all those roads would come due again at that time. What we've got to have for road resurfacing, it's an annual thing. We've got to find recurring revenue. It has to be a recurring revenue stream rather than, like we had talked about earlier, moving some money out of reserves for one-time projects, one-time infrastructure projects. Eventually, Ozella Trail is going to need a tremendous amount of repair out there. Literally, the sides are falling off into the water. That's an infrastructure project that several years ago was estimated at $10 to $12 million. So those one-time type projects would be, I don't want to say fine, but they would be candidates for moving some money out of reserves. Stuff that requires an ongoing revenue stream, I wouldn't support pulling it out of reserves.
Commissioner Bays?
I agree wholeheartedly, and I think sometime between August and September, we're going to have a presentation by Neighbors in Giblin. I feel very strongly about how current government budgets work. We're trying to do a lot of things off the back of ad valorem, and if you look at it across the nation, it's just a broken policy to think that that's the way you're going to do it. So the presentation that we're going to have is they're going to bring back a funding mechanism to get us where we need on roads that would have to be voted on. It would be a county-wide residential road resurfacing program because we need literally about $22 million every single year. And, I think this board, I will say, has taken some great strides in how we're going to progress in the future with taxes and how we're going to implement programs. One of them was by not accepting new roads in subdivisions. We don't have to do those anymore. If we can actually implement this funding mechanism for residential roads, we'll keep the collector roads. We know that gas tax is going down on a nationwide basis. We've seen that in our revenues. We're less than $9 million now in gas tax collections, and we think it'll, we know it'll continue to go down with fuel efficiencies and the things that are going on from the federal government level. But I think we have to look beyond even our road resurfacing. And when you look across the state and you look at other counties and how they're doing it, people go, I don't like those. I don't want MSBUs or TUs. I like them. It holds us accountable, and the people know exactly what they're getting, and the monies cannot be spent on anything else. Now, with that, I will say I want our millage then to be around, I would say, in the neighborhood of 4. I think that's where our millage should get to.
Yep.
If you get that millage down, but then you have dedicated sources of revenue that fund the things that the people desire and want and that are needed in this community, then you can get there. But we're not going to get there strictly off of ad valorem. I just ran a report the other day. We keep talking about behavioral health concerns. We gave Livestream $2 million. 38,000 plus members of this community are on some form of Medicaid. When we look at the new legislation that was just passed for Live Local, the Live Local Act. A developer can now come in here, and if it's zoned commercial, industrial, or mixed use, they don't have to come before this board. They can buy a piece of property, put it up. 40% of the units have to meet 120% of the AMI, and it comes off your tax rolls for 30 years. So there's a lot going on out there. I even asked housing the other day. I said, do we have Section 8 housing? It's been closed for a long time. It's getting ready to reopen in January approximately. Anybody in the United States of America can apply for those Section 8 housings in your community. So there's a lot to be thinking about. This is a lot to digest, and I know that it seems easy when you're sitting here and how you think about this, but there is a trickle-down effect to every single decision that we make and how we look at it. So when I think about what we're going to do, I think about when we look at collections of ambulance services. What does that mean to us? And how are we going to develop this county? And how are we going to pay for the things that are coming and being mindful of the growth that is on its way? I'm going to go so far as to say I've had a lot of people from the building department or builders come to me and say, oh, I really wish you would postpone those transportation fees because we're worried about the overload that the building department is going to get on the new system. I'm going to tell on record what I've told every single one of them. I have no desire, absolutely none, to postpone those transportation impact fees. We are so woefully behind in what we have done in the past on transportation impact fees that every single dollar matters. The second part of that is what I'm really concerned about. We went through some really bad times here in 2008 when we had the downturn of the economy and the building stopped. And a lot of our good craftsmen left this county and never came back. We now have a group of builders that are in this county. And I will tell you what I told them. These are the men and women that we sit on a church bench with, that we pass in the grocery store, we raise our kids together, and that's who I'm worried about. I'm not worried about the big corporate developer that is going to come in here and they're going to make their profit and they're not going to be a part of this community. It's the men and women that live in this community, that build our homes, that they will probably sit at a table and share a dinner with us, not the corporate developer. So if you want to be a part of our community, then I expect you to be a partner in our community. But don't come in here and take the cheese off the top and leave us with the leftovers. I'm off my rant.
I was about to say, nice rant. To sum it up, thank you, gentlemen, for your questions and what you brought before us. I would say that I'm going to throw out a metaphor that's not quite correct, but I would say that it's what we're doing with the point two is more than a Band-Aid. It's more like a tourniquet. It's actually really making some life-saving progress on the roads. However, what we need is much what Commissioner Bays was saying is a much healthier perspective on how we fund everything in this county. We're getting there. There's also, even if we could break the backs and wanted to break the backs of taxpayers, there's also legal ramifications on how high we can raise the millage. So it's not like we can jump directly to that funding level. And certainly that's not the temperature of this board anyway. I think what Commissioner Kennard proposed was a really good measure to get us through this transition period of figuring out how to fund it. And I completely agree with Commissioner Bays that our millage needs to be a whole heck of a lot lower, but by going to dedicated funding sources. Does the board have anything further before we call the vote? All right, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
We have just two slides left. One is important. to Department of Revenue mid-August. Trim notices will be mailed. September 7th is the tentative budget hearing, and September 26th is a final budget hearing. And then the last slide is our thank you to the board and all of the county staff for your assistance and direction with this budget. We know it is not always fun, and the decisions you have to make are difficult, all of them. So we
Madam Chair?
appreciate it.
Yes, Commissioner Kennard.
It is never fun. Not always fun. It's never fun to do this.
This is one of the worst parts of this job, I have to say.
Well done. Well done.
Yeah, well done. Thank you to staff for all the hard work, and we got more to do before September. Our next regular meeting is August 8th, 2023 at 1 p.m. right here in room 100. And there's nothing further. We are adjourned.